You know I've traveled near and far, sea to shining sea. I've seen a lot of places, people that were nice to me. One place that's in my heart, and this is how I feel. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. She's nestled in the sandhills on a river called Fayetteville. Special to so many who proudly served our country here. She was named for Lafayette and known for cotton mills. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. Babe Ruth hit his first one, heard around the world. Sherman marched with the Union and burned the arsenal. Old Market House still standing, but stands for freedom's will. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. My all-American city, Fayetteville. Talking about my hometown, Fayetteville.
Crazy on show. Yes, it is.
We'll get started in about 1 minute. Good evening. I'd like to call this August 25th, 2014 regularly scheduled council meeting to order, please, and ask Pastor Anderson to come to the podium and bless us with your blessing, please. When Pastor Anderson is finished, if we could all remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening. Let me read a passage from Jeremiah, the 29th chapter, verse 11. For I know that the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Let's pray. Eternal and everlasting Father, show this council your way and all the data and patterns that they must see. Among the many indicators and wise direction they must choose, help them to peer through the fog of confusion and glimpse the light glimmering ahead. Help them to choose the right path and head toward the right marker. Wisdom alone will not automatically make plans easy to adopt or implement, as nostalgia would tempt us to stay where we are. Prepare us to accept some chaos in the short run in order to make things better in the long run in an uncertain future. As they move on behalf of the citizens of Fayetteville, let them move wisely enough that we can stay together and claim our future together. God of our future, show them the way, and give them the courage to act. In Jesus' name we ask and pray. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic from which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Anderson, tell us something about your church and its address.
Oh, the church is Lost Creek AME Zion Church, and we're located in the Banner community right off Clinton Road. The church has been there for 130 years, and I've been there for the past 6 years as their pastor.
Welcome. And your services are what time?
11 o'clock.
Great. Good. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Council, this time, item 4.0 is the approval of the agenda. Mr. McDougall?
Oh, I'm sorry, my button
Okay.
shouldn't have been pushed.
I'll reset that. I'm looking for a motion for the...
Second.
Okay, we have a first by Mr. Crisp, a second by Mr. Hurst. Any questions in reference to the motions? Mr. Arp?
No, so I'm just voting.
Okay, now let's all vote then, please. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous. Would like to notify everyone our September 2nd meeting is changed to 4 p.m. We'll be meeting an hour early on September 2nd. That will be rightly advertised as well. So we'll be doing that September 2nd, 4 p.m. Cumberland County Library Services has a couple of slides, I think, to show us. Welcome.
Good evening.
Let me get set up here, please.
Sorry, did I surprise you?
Yes. My name is Jody Risischer, and I'm the Public Library Director. Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to talk to you about the Public Library. It's a wonderful resource. And whether you know it or not, we're partners, the Public Library and the city. I want to give you just an example of this. You authorized a new bus stop at the West Regional Library recently. And I want to tell you, feedback from staff tells us that people are using the bus to go to the library and take computer skills classes. Teens are taking the bus to go to the library to use it as it should be used. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Oh, and I am aware that a week or two ago you had a citizen complain to you about library computers, that they were not accessible, you may recall. Well, we heard about that and we've made contact with that citizen, and it really was a good opportunity. We were already working on our assistive services, expanding them so that we can be more inclusive, and so we're working on that, just to let you know, and hope to have some more devices available for people. Well, this is the first slide. Today, the library owner, the business, tomorrow, the business owner. That's to indicate that we are a resource for small businesses. We offer a great deal of support. We help people research. We have free resources, classes, and databases. But there's much, much more. You may be aware that we have 8 locations in the county. 5 of those are in the city of Fayetteville, and 3 are outside. Hope Mills, Spring Lake, and East Regional are outside the city. We also operate the court library at the courthouse, of course. Just a few numbers, didn't want to overwhelm you with numbers, but last fiscal year we circulated about 2.3 million items. And we had about 1.3 million visitors, answered 329,000 questions. Some of those were pretty tough ones, required a lot of research, but those are the kind we like. We had 804,000 uses, individual uses of our computers. That's not people, but that's in increments of time. Still, that's up, and that's a number that keeps rising. Most of our funding comes from the county. We're dealing with a budget of about $10.8 million this fiscal year, and that also includes that court library and a program called Raising a Reader. Those are state funds that come through the Partnership for Children. We are vigorous pursuers of grants. We need to be, federal, state, and local grants, as a matter of fact. Some of our local funders include the Arts Council. The Arts Council has been very, very good to us. We have been able to sustain a storytelling workshop festival every year, and we have a writers workshop. This is its second year. But the Community Foundation and United Way are also local funders. We are now working on a grant to expand our outreach to military families. This is one of our primary roles. We are one of the few places where people can find access to technology, especially children from limited means, families with limited resources. We were able this past year to receive a grant to install smart boards at all of our branches in order to expand our services to special needs kids with a focus on autism, sensory story times, and the schools were a great resource for us on that. We just added iPads at each location. You see the little guy in the upper right-hand corner. He's using one of our new iPads with a lot of educational apps on it. This is another primary role, especially in the past few years. We have one-on-one classes, our instruction, one-on-one instruction as people request that. Very small classes, databases for use, and of course lots of books. Job fairs twice a year. We just had one this past week with over 1,000 job seekers in attendance. And also, thank you, the city provided some parking passes for that job fair. We're very grateful. We're moving into the area of teen employment and have classes available for teens on getting jobs. We've made a real effort in the past few years to extend the invitation to the public library to the community. These are just some of the pictures. Operation Ceasefire, we were at a Swamp Dogs game. If there's a community event, we make an effort to try to be there. Partnerships make for a stronger community, and we've got lots of partnerships in the works. Because we got a Golden Leaf grant a few years ago, we have a mobile computer lab that we take out to do jobs and careers training. And with that, we've made some connections. We have a connection with the Salvation Army. They have an after-school program, so we have reached out to them. The Connections, you may be familiar with them. That's a new nonprofit. We'll be doing some job and careers training with them. Their focus is on homeless women with children. We're also working on a curriculum to take to the detention center to do some jobs and career training for young people who are incarcerated. We have an ulterior motive in all this. It's to connect and support people through the public library. A couple of years ago, this library won a national award. This is our nation's highest honor for museums and public libraries. And nearly every year for decades preceding my arrival about 16 years ago, this library has won recognition just about every year for its programs and resources, and services rather. Youth services is a pillar upholding the strong library. We've got a strong commitment. We've received statewide recognition for our STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math. LibrariCon is this weekend if you want to participate in a really interesting event. This is for teens, but you should come and see some of the remarkable costumes and see teens having fun, see teens engaged in a public library. We also have a program, a database called tutor.com. This is a very popular service. It's a chat service for, tutoring. And it's a certified teacher on the other end. It's been very popular, especially for kids in the 11th and 12th grades for some of the higher level math classes that they're taking. I like to say that our service area is from the cradle to assisted living, and so we have a full range of programs and services, but our mobile outreach will visit those who cannot come into the library. We still have some traditional services, including local and state history room, and this connects people with their past. Although there's a modern twist even in this room with a lot of digitized resources available. We had a surprise visit from a U.S. congressman a few weeks ago, and he wrote a very nice letter. He is depicted here, Congressman Walter Jones, and he wrote a very nice letter to me, and he said we helped him retrieve a part of his family history. Well, a 21st century library evolves, changes, and responds to community needs. And so we're always offering new services. A couple of the newer ones, we have CAC readers now for our military community and all of our branches. We've got a load of bunch of downloadables for any device. We have a couple of unique partnerships. Our West Regional Library that I mentioned before is a joint use facility. So we're on the campus of the New Century School and share a wall with them. And there's a door that goes up at the end of the school year or school day and during the summer, and then the public library operates the media center, becomes an extension of the public library. That's where that newest bus stop is. Also in Spring Lake, we have a partnership with FTCC. We are the campus library for the Spring Lake campus of FTCC. Last but not least, I must mention the Friends of the Library, nonprofit closely connected to the public library. Their funding is critical to the high level of programming that the public library is able to offer. I urge you to consider personal memberships in the Friends. It's a good thing. They support the Summer Reading Club, those STEM programs that I was talking about, and all the teen programs. We are embarking on a campaign to build up the Library Endowment Trust as well for sustainability. I wanted to keep it pretty short and sweet. I know you've got a lot on your docket. Are there any questions for me?
Mr. Hurst has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Jody, thank you for your leadership and your hard work with our Cumberland County Public Library.
Yes.
Congratulations on the over 1,000 that attended the job fairs. You had two.
Yes,
two per year. My question is, here it says, has focused on workforce development through job fairs. Do you have any way to receive feedback or follow-up or a way to measure how successful or what results from these two job fairs that you host?
Unfortunately, that's very difficult to get feedback. And it's not for lack of effort. We contact the companies who are hiring and ask them to give us feedback, but with limited results. We do know that a number of those vendors were hiring, and people come back to us, the people that were at the job fair, and tell us that they got jobs. But we use a percentage. I think it's 4 or 5%, and I can check on that, but I think that's standard for any job fair. That DSS has the same problems
Same
with
results?
their,
Okay.
the same problem.
Thank you, Jim.
Getting that feedback. Wish it was easier. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for such a nice presentation.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. All right, council will move into the reports from our boards and commissions at this time. Ask a representative from the Senior Citizen Advisory Commission to come forward. How you doing? Welcome.
Good evening, Council and Mr. Mayor. I'm Kerry Berg. I'm the current chairman of the Joint City-County Senior Citizens Advisory Commission. And the Joint Senior Citizens Advisory Commission has 7 members appointed by the City Council, and the county has the same. It initially was 10 members since the inception, but seemed to be a very difficult time to get the vacancies filled, and then again to get enough members to attend the meetings, have a quorum. So last year, we had voted to change the bylaws, and we adjusted the membership to 7 for city and 7 for county. At the same time, we also changed the meetings to 9 meetings a month rather than 12, having July and August off during the summer and December for the Christmas holiday. And our commission is dedicated to improving the quality of life for senior citizens in Fayetteville, Cumberland County. And the commission strives to assist the senior population by advocating for seniors and informing them on issues and opportunities affecting them. What we have worked on was back when the Parks, Bonds, and Recreation bond issue was going full force, and of course that went away. And we had a petition with Mr. Hume with the transportation to reinstate the bus stop at the Blue Street Senior Center, and that was, I guess, near the tail end of last year, and finally that was reinstated of June of this year. And what we're currently working on is a senior community survey to identify services and facility needs for seniors. And I want to give a little background on that, if I may, but what we're planning to work on in the interim of this survey being conducted, we want to get some improved communication going between, I guess, for the seniors out there, let them know what educational classes on city services that mainly affect them could be available, and certain agencies for seniors in city and county that to have some sort of a place to find out all this information so they know where to go to get help, and they can reach out and get some assistance that they need. Now, as far as the survey, back in our meeting in September of last year, we actually didn't have a quorum, so we just had a conversation, so to speak, and Mr. Wright had mentioned, like, okay, where are we going? Mr. Willie Wright, one of our members there, where are we going? What have we done? And are we doing what we're supposed to do as assigned by the charter and bylaws? And the answer was we weren't really doing that. We were pretty much just spinning our wheels. And to help the seniors, we didn't really know what was needed to help them and to get information out to them. So we had the idea, well, we really need to conduct a survey to find out what the senior population needs as far as facilities and so on and so forth. So I said, well, okay, I'll go to Fayetteville State and speak to them. Mr. Wright went to Methodist University, and Fayetteville State embraced the idea. I went and spoke with Dr. Jackson, who's the assistant dean at the School for Business and Economics, and Fayetteville State really embraced the idea. And they are on this thing full force. In fact, the ones that are in the process of conducting the survey and putting it all together is Dr. Sarah Chung, a professor of marketing, Dr. Lee Brown, professor of management, and Dr. Michelle Edgill specializes in the healthcare management and has done some specialized research in the senior population. And there's Dr. Pamela Jackson, again, Assistant Dean of School of Business Economics at Fayetteville State, and she is the project manager. And Dr. Chung, Dr. Jackson, Mr. Wright are present here this evening. And the survey has been, I guess the process has been put together on it, and a grant has been applied for through the Cumberland Community Foundation. That's been going on over the past year, and just adding information as they requested, and it's looks pretty well like the grant should be awarded possibly next month. They're getting ready to review some things, and then with that being said, the survey can go forth and take place. We're really looking forward to this because Fayetteville State's doing just a real super job of what they have set up, and it's going to be not just people going through a process. They really care about what they're doing, so we really have a real super team that's going to be helping us with all of this. Is there any questions?
Mr. Hurst.
Mr. Berg, this survey that y'all have been working on with the foundation for about a year, it's going to go to all senior citizens in Cumberland County?
Well, initially, what we're looking at was the population that's never heard from. It's out sort of the middle of the nowhere, doesn't know they have a voice, and that's what it was focused on. Then it just gradually became going to be county-wide. It's going out to all areas of that. And it's going to be having focus groups locally and then reaching out to different areas, and like when the senior groups meet like out in Eastover and the Spring Lake and all around, and get a real large sampling of that, not just one particular group, and not to have things just like statistics that you might see off an AARP survey, to actually have things to be presented to city and county that they can actually do something about, or at least work to make improvements towards.
Okay, and also in your meetings, there's still hope among the seniors for a senior citizens center?
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
But of course, that depends on money and all the unlimited wants with limited resources. And certainly a new senior center or some badly needed improvements to the one that's available. Yes, sir.
Mr. Wright.
Yes, Mr. Burke. Councilman Hurst asked a question about the center, the Senior Citizen Center, and those were my questions as well. And the question was, based upon your research and your knowledge right now with senior citizens in our community, what would be the best impact for our senior citizens at this point?
As far as a new center?
Well, a center would be, but is there anything else that you found out that they have needs for?
Well, other than what we feel is that they don't know. I mean, the ones who are in need of services are just not aware of what's out there. And there's always the thing, too, that a lot of them are afraid to reach out for fear of government coming in and say, well, look at these circumstances here, and really, just causing headaches for them, and just want to, get where they can find out where they can go for help and things like that. There's a lot of folks that need assistance out there. They don't know that they can get it, and there's agencies and folks that want to help them. As far as the senior center, they have a lot of programs going there, and they're pretty much limited by size to the scope of the programs they can offer.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested to know, based upon your numbers of senior citizens, have you took a survey of how many of those senior citizens are local and grew up in Fayetteville, or are those that came from somewhere else and settled in Fayetteville?
Well, not as of yet, but that could be, of course, determined when the survey gets underway, getting the results back. That is an interesting point, though, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Burge. I'm so honored and excited about this survey. I know we spoke about this at the one of the ADA meetings, and I really want to thank Fayetteville State University for taking on this wonderful opportunity. When you're thinking about, I have a lot of senior centers in my district, from the Blue Street location to the Hope Sick off of Old Wilmington Road. There's a lot of senior facilities out there. So this is a good opportunity for them to get, the information firsthand. So thank you.
Mr. Byrd, thank you, council. Any further questions?
Hey,
Thank you very much for such a nice presentation. And council, we have an annual report from the Planning Commission at this point. It's item 6.02. Hello and welcome.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm Dr. Bill Fiden. I'm your current chairman of your Planning Commission, and I'm happy to present you with an overview of our last year's activities and highlights of them, and the number of items brought before us and forwarded to you. As you know, the Planning Commission is a 9-member commission with 2-year terms with 1 reappointment, and there are 2 alternate board members to make sure we have a quorum. Currently, though, we are looking forward to new appointments, having lost 3 members to unexpected relocations or extended family illness. Now, I might mention that I don't have a slide program, but this report, I think, is included in your packet, so if you want to follow with me. As you know, our primary responsibility is approval of long-range plans and making recommendations to you regarding amendments to the Development Code, which is the UDO, and we're fairly proud of that document, and area plans otherwise. We also look at requests for large development alternative signage plans, which I will mention subsequently, to the new neighborhood compatibility permit process and appeals of the Technical Review Committee. Now, overall, as I see it, as in the political sphere, unbridled liberty leads to anarchy. In the planning sphere, unbridled planning and zoning leads to civic chaos. And that's why we have the UDO. And actually, you have presented us with, I think, some quite outstanding guidelines. For example, the Downtown Renaissance Plan update, in the various corridor plans, this being the Bragg Boulevard one, and then also some other interesting critical components of site security. Things like this that give us guidance and allow us to bring to you what we think are reasonable proposals. During the last year, over 47 changes to the Development Code, the UDO, were made during the past fiscal year, some very sweeping, such as restructuring open space, parkland, and tree protection, which is a particular issue that I'm sensitive to, and creation of neighborhood compatibility permits. These changes resolve 29 points of concern presented by the Home Builders Association. And as you know, we try to be sensitive to business needs and make our deliberations business friendly without selling the store. Over the past 2.5 years, over 100 ordinances have been forwarded to City Council for approval. A major strategic effort of you and of the city has been focused on economic development. We have shaped several regulatory tools that are part of the redevelopment toolbox, the so-called redevelopment toolbox, where density or incentives or increased flexibility have, through new uses or changed procedures or alternate approaches, have given businesses an opportunity to adapt to what rules we have. And many of the amendments were the result of a partnership effort with the private sector to better fit the standards of local conditions and options. And one of the most recent issues was that of tobacco shops. And in fact, the hearing was held here because we had so many attendees who had their points of view. And of course, we want to come up with a proposal that is fair to business, but also controls problem stores and issues that relate to police activity. One of the new tools was the large development, that is over 10 acres, alternative sign plan. And Our first applicant, as you may know, was Cross Creek Mall in 2012, where we approved their large signs, which were appropriate, though, to their development. Other examples included Methodist University with the flags and the wall, the Covenant Baptist Church, in two large developments on either side of Santa Fe Boulevard or road west of the All-American Expressway, which I think you're familiar with, right near Fort Bragg. And they all have new alternative signage in place. And another tool is the Neighborhood Compatibility Permit, which is a new initiative, which we hope will make a more manageable process for infill development, that is, development in smaller areas for a project. The most recent one being a 5-lot development on private property on Oak Ridge Drive, where a historic home unfortunately was torn down, but preserved for in large part by the developer. And although we regret the loss of the older structure, as you know, we recommended approval unanimously. Now, in this regard, though, if only financial incentives are taken, I think we will sell our souls to forsake historic preservation. And in this regard, I guess, apparently the state, North Carolina, is no longer offering tax incentives for historical preservation. And so perhaps then the PWC and you as the city need to step up and provide those incentives, if possible. By the way, historical preservation, of course, is the heart of the community, and as you know, especially in the many northeastern cities during the 50s and 60s, anything that was old was torn down, and they've come to regret that greatly. We also, the Ramsey corridor planning, as one of the corridor, recommended overlays to facilitate redevelopment at a denser, more urban scale. And as a result of those amendments, we have considered some amendments have been introduced, and these are referred to as SACO and RACO, in case you're suburban and regional activity center overlays. So you'll be getting those shortly. In terms of needs and issues, there's a significant, as you know, understaffing of this city division, that is planning, at less than half the staff per capita versus 10 comparable North Carolina cities. So therefore, this shortage limits the long-range initiatives that the staff can support. And apparently the city plan of 2010, which was developed about 15 years ago, has not been updated, and we need somebody to do that. So we appreciate the additional staff position that you have authorized for 2015, but we would like you to continue efforts to find funding for a long-range planner so we can bring that up to date.
That is on our list.
Right. Also, we want to urge you to help us in the appointment of our new members. The new appointments will be coming before you in a few weeks, and obviously they will have significant impact on our committee and things that we forward to you. So overall, I hope that we are doing a good job. I'm privileged to be the chairman and to represent our members, all of whom live in Fayetteville, some like myself in historic areas and others in other parts of the city. And I think Fayetteville, having not been a native of the South, is an outstanding city and needs to move forward, but also preserve its historic heritage. So with that, I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Thyden. Yes, Councilmember Colvin does, and we've got one or two more.
Dr. Thyden, thank you for that presentation. Just a question for you. I am fortunate to chair a committee on corridors and gateways that we're trying to concentrate on dealing with the oversupply of commercial empty real estate. As you make your recommendations, I heard you mention the historic credit, and I know the state's historic credit program has expired. How important is that in the overall redevelopment of these corridors? Being that you're trying to initiate new growth, can you give me that balance?
Well, I don't think just an old building by itself necessarily has historical significance. I mean, it could be a shack or a ramshack structure, so that for example, in Murchison corridor, there are a lot of structures that are old, but not particularly, I think, worthy of saving or historical. So I think we have to be, diligent in looking at those things that are historical. For example, historic mansions, which I guess on Dick Street there is a complex of the Women's Club, I think, of Fayetteville, which has a unique complex of buildings, which should be a tourist attraction. So I guess it's things like that. But we need to keep that perspective. But obviously we don't want to impede development.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Crisp.
Doctor, a great part of the issues and business of this city is resolved and solved by boards and commissions such as yours, and often we don't take time to say thank you. This council cannot run this city alone, and it takes hundreds of volunteers such as yourself assisting staff and working with development services and other parts of our city staff to make things happen. And I just want to take this moment on camera, on mic, to say how much we appreciate what you and your commission are doing, as well as other boards and commissions for this city. Thank you, Doctor.
Right, thank you very much. And of course, I thank our members, and in particular, our staff members, without whom we couldn't function, and who provide us with very excellent summaries.
Would you allow your members to recognize themselves?
Yeah, please stand up and recognize yourselves, Karen, and whoever else.
Now, who is that?
Hilton. Without them, of course, we can't really function.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for allowing us the opportunity.
Council, I'll move to item 7.0, which is the consent agenda. Mr. Moan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item 7.02 for a separate vote.
Okay. Mr. Colvin?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull item 7.10 for a separate vote.
All right. Anybody else?
Need a second.
All right. Seeing none, if I can get a motion for the consent for approval with the absence of 7.02 and 7.10.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we approve the consent, absent item 7.02 and absent item 7.10.
Second.
And is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, council, I'll ask for your vote, please. Still missing one. Thank you. That's unanimous, Madam Clerk. Item .72, Mr. Moan.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is a rezoning case P14-20F at the corner of Hoke Loop and Cliffdale Roads. I wanted to pull this for a separate vote versus boxing it all in with everything else.
Okay, and do you want to make a motion on that?
I'm going to make the motion that we disapprove the rezoning.
Okay. Is there a second? Oh, Madam Attorney.
If that's the case, then this item is on consent, and so you would need to set this item for a public hearing.
Okay. Just by being pulled for discussion, Madam Attorney, or if Mr. Moan's motion passes, it needs to be set for a...
Well, the motion is not to approve the rezoning, and so if that is the motion, then it would need to be, your only option is to approve it or set a public hearing. And because his motion is to, not to approve the rezoning, it would need to be set for a public hearing.
And, Madam Attorney, may I withdraw my motion and let someone else make a motion?
It was never seconded, so that's fine. Thank you. Is there a motion on item 7.02?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. McDougal.
I move that we approve 7.02.
Okay, it's Mr. McDougal with the motion, Mr. Wright with the second. Council, is there discussion on the motion? And seeing none, council, I'll ask for your vote, please. Madam Clerk, that is 8-2 with Councilmember Crisp and Councilmember Moan voting against. Councilmember Colvin, 7.10.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I had asked that this particular item be pulled from consent and discussed further, which was the awarding of the contract for the air carrier apron rehabilitation phase 2 at the Fayetteville Airport. Just wanted to get staff to present a little more about the bids that were received, the contractors that were being recommended, and any participation guidelines or any insight that they could render us on that.
Okay. Mr. Brad Whitted, our illustrious airport manager, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Be happy to elaborate on that. Of course, Gloria Wrench, our purchasing agent, our director, is here with us as well if you have further questions. However, these federal grants are dictated by the FAA policy regarding bidding and also DBE requirements. So we are required to have sealed bids and have an open bidding process in terms of allowing all to participate. These sealed bids were received from 3 contractors. There are stipulations and requirements in our specifications that require DBE participation. If the DBE participation is not met at the full rate, there's also a federal requirement that they go through good faith effort. And in this case, particularly RC Construction, who is the low bidder, did have originally 11.71, which is our goal, but one of the DBEs fell out of certification between the quotes and the bid time. So therefore, we couldn't count it. We ended up with approximately 8.4%. However, since it was below the goal, we did review the good faith effort, and they met all that criteria. So there's really no reason not to award to the lowest bidder.
And where is this particular?
No, continue.
Where is this particular construction company based out of, sir?
Well, I believe they're from Greenwood, Mississippi.
Okay.
They do a lot of local work in the area on Fort Bragg, and they also participated. They did the construction in Phase 1 apron. However, they were a subcontractor from Barnhill. This particular project, they decided to bid it separately.
And how much was the total amount of this contract?
The bid amount is $2,444,439.
So what some of my concern was that we are trying to, or at least it's in my interest to try to encourage more of our local businesses to get a part of some of these work opportunities. You know, as you know, Fayetteville has one of the highest unemployment rates in the state, and I think that we need to recycle our dollars if at all possible, as well as, you know, I spoke to the deputy city manager after the meeting, and he can you go into a little bit? The UNC School of Government has a recommended participation level that they encourage cities to participate in. Can you explain to me the difference with this particular project? That recommended level is usually between 20 and 30%, and you said this is about an 8% participation for minority or disadvantaged businesses.
As far as the DBE portion you're talking
Yes,
about?
Yes, sir.
Yes, the FAA has a specific process that is really used for all federal contracts. It looks at the type of work that's being constructed, and then they evaluate the number of DBEs that are available in our geographic area, and the process calculates what would be a reasonable DBE given the pool of DBEs that are available in that specific discipline. The Fayetteville Regional Airport hires a DBE to calculate that for us. And so it's a full report that's, every project is calculated individually based on these pool. And the recommendation was 11.7%.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Art.
Hey, thank you very much for this information. So just to recap, it's a federal contract effort, and it was a lowest price technically acceptable proposal.
Right.
So as long as the contractor in the sealed bid process, and all the bids were open at the same time, I understand.
That's correct.
So when you open all the bids, if they're all technically acceptable and they meet the DBE requirement, you automatically default to the lowest bidder.
That's correct. We can't, I know there's a preference locally, but we do not have the ability to make that a qualifier.
So even if somebody has a greater DBE participation, you don't have the latitude because of the federal guidelines to go to that. I mean, you have to go lowest price technically acceptable.
It goes lowest price, and they have to meet the criteria. If they have lower than the goal and they've done a good faith effort, then that's the criteria that is acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wright.
What determines a good faith effort?
Well, they have to show that they have gone to the pool, and North Carolina DOT is the only pool of acceptable certified DBEs that we can use in a federal project. So the bidder has to go to the state website and pull all of the DBEs available in that pool, in that discipline, and they have to show that they have contacted them, asked for quotes, and provided that opportunity for them to participate in their process.
Okay, so their proof of saying that they contact that organization was that they tell you that
They document it and sign
They document it, okay.
It could be that they've contacted, let's say, 4 DBEs. They may not get a response from 2.
Sure.
In that case. So that's the good faith effort. They made a good faith to go out and find the DBEs and provide them an opportunity, and they document that to us.
Okay. My last question to you, sir, based on your experience in the list of DBEs that we have, would you say that we need more DBEs to participate, or?
Well, there's in some disciplines there is shortages. It just depends. And of course, the DBEs are a pool really kind of statewide. It isn't, there isn't necessarily a local pool.
For federal jobs.
So there's always opportunities for them. One of the restrictions is that a lot of people don't want to go through the process of getting certified. That has been an issue that we've dealt with. We find some folks that may be a woman-owned business or they're a successful DBE, but they just don't want to be burdened with the paperwork and the process to go through. That's disconcerting to us, but we can't force people to do that. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Arp, then Mr. Colvin.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve the award of contract for air carrier apron rehabilitation Phase 2 for the Fayetteville Regional Airport as presented by staff.
Is there a second to Mr. Arp? I heard Mr. Chris second first. Council, is there discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, I'll ask for your vote, please. Still missing one. Oh, that's in the affirmative then. So that is an 8-2 with Mr. Wright and Mr. Colvin voting against.
Thank you very much.
All right, council, at this time we'll move into 8.0, which is our public hearings. Individuals wishing to speak at the public hearing should have signed up with the city clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. 15 minutes will be allowed for each side of the issue to be discussed. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, unless your group wishes to appoint just one speaker. The time used in response to a question from a council member will not be counted against your time. Discussion following the public hearing will be limited to this body only unless someone from this chair recognizes someone in the audience to respond to a question. So when you hear your name called by the city clerk, we ask that you come to the podium. Clearly state your name and home address for the record, please. Then when you see the light located on the podium change from green to yellow, you have 30 seconds left to speak. When you see the red light come on, your time has expired. Again, due to policy restrictions of this body, we are unable to extend any time given. So with that being said, we'll give it to Mr. Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Evening, council members. First case we have before you is P1414F.
Hold on just a minute, Mr. Hartman.
Please.
Madam Attorney.
Mayor, the first two items are special use permits, and so typically what we do is have the clerk to go ahead and swear in all the speakers before providing testimony.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, you want to call your speakers?
Mr. Ivan Musso, Mr. Lonnie Player, Mr. Jonathan Charleston, Mr. Tommy Bradford, Mr. Crawford McKeithen. Do you want me to do the second item too? Okay. Okay. Mr. Tom Johnson and Mr. Graham Herring.
If you will all come forward, please, and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you.
Also, Mayor, just as a reminder, because these items, both of these items are special use permits, there are no time limits, unlike in your other public hearings. But of course, I'm sure that you will remind the speakers to be brief and not to be repetitious.
Great, thank you. Did you just swear in .01 and .02?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. Mr. Harmon.
Again, this case is P1414F. This is for a special use permit to allow a cell tower or communications tower at 3227 Fort Bragg Road. We'll see in a moment on the map, the land use plan does call for this to be heavy commercial. And our growth vision plan talks about advanced planning for all infrastructure should be supported. This map gives you an idea of the surrounding area. Property is mainly surrounded by heavy commercial zoning, or our CC community district. The only exception is this corner here of the properties that actually touch it, and that is zoned SF6. As you can see here along Fort Bragg Road, mainly commercial. This area here is part of Fayetteville Tech, and then we have single-family residential as we get back in here into the Sky Drive area. Current land uses in the area, again, heavy commercial there along Fort Bragg Road and Bragg Boulevard. Institutional here with Faytech, and single-family residential in these yellow areas. Our land use plan looks very similar to that. It calls for heavy commercial along Fort Bragg Road in this area. The blue is for institutional, which is where Fayetteville Tech is currently, and then the yellows are a low-density residential. This gives you an idea of what the site plan would look like. This is a commercial district, so unlike in a residential district where you have to have a setback the height of the tower, in a commercial district it only has to be half the height of the tower. Whoops, I'll go back here real quick. And this is, again, right at the intersection of where Fort Bragg Road and Bragg Boulevard come together. The building that's shown on this site plan is no longer there. You may have recognized it in the past as Lee's Lounge. What the applicant is proposing is a 125-foot tower. This is called a monopine. As you can see by what you have in front of you, the top portion of the tower is made to look similar to a pine tree, very similar to what you might see as far as artificial Christmas tree limbs around the antenna area and extending down the pole for a ways. As I said before, the tower itself would be 125 feet. The actual limbs that come off of it would extend another 10 feet to 135 feet above the tower. Just again, this is just the landscaping for the proposed tower. And it just meets the city's typical landscaping for towers. This again gives you an idea of where the property is located. Here to the right, just on the edge of the screen, is a country fish fry, and then you've got an automotive repair shop just off the screen to the left. The tower placement would actually be kind of hard to see, but there's kind of a little flag right back here in the very back, and that's where the actual tower would be located if approved. This is one photo from the balloon test. There were actually 3 balloon tests done at this particular property. There was an original one done before the first zoning commission meeting. None of the neighbors were notified of that. There were just pictures taken of it. There was a second balloon test scheduled as part of the request of the zoning commission, and because of a delay in the post office delivery, the letters did not get to the from Verizon to the owners till the day of the test, so they weren't able to really see it that day. So we scheduled a third test, and I met with several of the property owners adjacent to this, and we went out and watched them fly the balloon, and this is one of the photos from it, and you'll see some simulations from that too here in a moment. This is not a simulation. This is an actual monopine on one of Verizon's sites. I'm not sure exactly where this one's located, but this gives you an idea of what this actually looks like. And this being the top of the tower again, where it's covering up the antenna. And then this is just an actual one out somewhere as well. We do not currently have one of these in the city of Fayetteville. Conditions of the recommended by the zoning commission and staff, there would be the attached site plan with final approval by the TRC. Zoning Commission and staff have recommended approval of the proposed special use permit. That's based on the tower being located in areas surrounded basically by commercial. Proposal meets all applicable standards of the city. Those conditions of the site plan that I mentioned above, and changes to fencing to meet the city's requirements, which they have already done. Are there any questions of staff before we open your public hearing?
Mr. Colvin.
Just had a question, Mr. Harmon. So this is the first tower of this sort to be used in Fayetteville. Is it up to the carrier or to the property owner as to if they would like to utilize something a little more cosmetically friendly?
Yeah, our ordinance requires that unless there's some reason that they be a monopole, which is what you see mainly around town, which is just a pole with the antenna inside of the pole, and so you just got a stick. In this case, our ordinance does encourage camouflaging of these. It's not a requirement, but it's encouraged. And I believe that Nextel thought that in this case, because there's a thick group of pines behind this site going back onto the Fayetteville Tech area, that this would be a good candidate for monopine.
Mr. Arp, then Mr. Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Just up the road, if you go up Bragg Boulevard to Sycamore Dairy, there's a tower on Bargain Street. What's the height of that tower?
I'm going by memory, but I believe that's a 195-foot tower at that area.
And this tower the proposed tower is how tall?
125 for the tower itself, but 135 once with the extension of the branches.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to follow up on Mr. Arp. The balloon tests, that 3 were conducted. I assume the citizens, the neighbors, were able to.
They were, especially the last one. Mr. Mike Lawyer, being one of the neighborhood representatives, kind of set that one up with the cellular provider so that all the neighbors would know when it was happening. And he and myself met at the site where the tower was going, and then there was other neighbors, Mr. Bradford and some others that met at their home, to see where it would show through the woods. And then me and Mike, Mr. Lawyer, both switched off and went back and forth kind of to the other side as well to see where that was coming through. It was kind of a windy day, so it was hard we had to get photos when we could and spot it when we could. So
Yeah, that was my question, was the photos taken, and we have photos from various locations, was it the 125-foot or 135 feet and windy or no wind? So
yeah, it was definitely windy, and I will tell you that because of the wind, there's really no way to determine the exact height of where the balloon was, because they did have to let out more, because of the way it was drifting, they had to let out more line for the balloon than the 135 feet. But it was drifting at an angle, so it's hard to get a true representation. It's more of a representation of where it would show up in the wood lines behind their homes.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. And I understand you were sworn in, so your presentation, we should consider that as part of the evidence presented tonight before we get into the public hearing?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wright.
Harmon, would this tower affect the value of any property around it at all?
I'm not a real estate appraiser, and I will not testify to that. I believe that there are documents that are part of your packet and that will be presented tonight that will have some testimony to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Harmon, I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer or not, because the Q98 tower sits just across the street from it. I know back
North and a little, yeah.
in old technology, if you had a cell phone near a radio tower, it would broadcast your conversation out. New technology doesn't do that anymore?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so that shouldn't be an issue
yeah.
for the Cumulus people?
And you may want to ask the representative from the cell tower company the same question, but as far as I understand, no, it would not affect that.
Council, are you all ready for the public hearing? Madam Clerk, we'll open the public hearing.
Mayor, our first speaker speaking in favor is Mr. Ivan Musso.
Good evening. Again, my name is Ivan Musa. Address is 9915 Pin Oak Acres Way in Charlotte, North Carolina, 28277. And I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Verizon, and the property owner. And I'll be very brief. I know we are limited in time. And I would just like to reference not only our application packet, but the city council action memo submitted to you that summarizes our proposal here. Again, it's 125-foot stealth monopine with a 10-foot extension of the poles with a lightning rod as well, so it'll be 135 overall, which is a fairly short tower in the realm of cell towers. And we've been very diligent. Verizon's been very sensitive to the concerns of especially the surrounding residential area in designing it to blend in with that tree canopy from the point of view of those neighborhoods. So it'll just peek over those trees and blend in very nicely. You'll, of course, be able to tell from Bragg Boulevard that it's a cell tower disguised as a tree, but from the perspective of the neighborhood, it'll really blend in with that tree canopy very nicely. Verizon did satisfy all the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and we worked with the planner to make sure we satisfied those. And we actually had two public hearings in front of the zoning commission, and the first one ended with a tabling to address further concerns and gather some more evidence. And when we came to the second hearing, we submitted the additional evidence, and it was to the satisfaction of the zoning commission, and along with the recommendation of approval from zoning staff, the zoning commission voted to recommend approval as well. And we just request that you vote in the same manner this evening.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, the next four speakers are speaking in opposition. The first speaker is Mr. Lonnie Player.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Lonnie Player. My office address is 400 Westwood Shopping Center, Suite 210, Fayetteville, North Carolina. If you bear with me a moment, I am technologically.
These were done as four separate photos.
I want to start with the one. From Breezewood, which would be.
Is that the one?
Yeah, that's the one. Okay. So what would come next? How would I go to the next one?
I'll probably have to.
Okay.
Yes,
This
sir.
one. Thank you for bearing with me. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I am here as is Jonathan Charleston, my colleague tonight, representing the homeowners in the Willow Bend neighborhood off of Sky Drive, which will be impacted by this proposed zoning tower. As the council is well aware, and as I will not belabor, there are 7 findings of fact that you need to find in the approval of any special use permit. 2 of those are negative impact on the aesthetics of the surrounding property and negative impact on property values. We are here tonight in opposition to the cell tower because of its impact on the appearance of my client's properties, and as a result of that, because of the negative impact it will have on their property values. I'd like to address negative appearance first, if I could. If we could pull up how do I pull up? Okay, there we go. Thank you. This cell tower will be similar in nature to the one that Verizon has erected off of Rayford Road across from Tallywood Shopping Center. We have a shot of that for you here in the first slide. This shot is taken from 2919 Breezewood Avenue, about the same distance that the tower would be from the Willow Bend neighborhood, as we will see in the second slide. The second slide that I have to show you would be a shot of the tower. I think that would be number 2 or I don't know. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, we'll see here in a second.
Okay.
Nope.
No, that's not it. It'll be this one. The second shot that I have for you is a shot of the tower superimposed onto the background. This is Mr. Bradford's house in Willow Bend. As you can see, the tower and its apparatus at the top is very much visible from his front yard, very much visible from his backyard, very much visible from the surrounding properties. The third shot that we have for you is that one right there. third shot that we have for you shows the same tower in the proposed monopine configuration. As you can see, it appears almost free-floating in Mr. Bradford's backyard and from his front yard and to the sight lines of his surrounding neighborhoods. This is superimposed at the 135-foot height. That will be the height of the tower with its attendant branches and lightning rod. And just to give you some perspective, Craig, if I could have one more piece of assistance from you, I do appreciate that. It'll be that one. Give you some perspective. The Sistell building downtown is about the same height as this tower. And so I wanted to show you how that would look from Mr. Bradford's backyard, from his front yard, and from the surrounding sight lines in the Willow Bend neighborhood. It might be a little bit wider than what we've seen, but I think you can probably see that. And I think that it has a negative impact on the aesthetics of the surrounding property. We have heard about the balloon test. It was, in fact, as I am told, a very windy day. From the base of the balloon, it was difficult to tell whether you could, whether it was floating at a height of 70 feet, whether it was floating at a height of 125 feet, whether it was floating at a height of 135 feet. It was impossible to tell from those photos. These give you an indication, regardless of that, of what it would look, of how this cell tower would appear in a static, at a static height. With respect to also some mention has been made of the height of the surrounding trees. I believe in the package that was presented by Verizon, it was suggested that some of these longleaf pines are 125 feet in height. We would take issue with that. Some of these trees may be 70 or 80 feet tall. None of them are 125 feet tall. So, but again, I think that you can see from the shots we've shown you that this thing looks anything but like a longleaf pine and is going to stick out very dramatically to the surrounding sight lines. With respect to negative impact on property values, I would note from the materials provided by Verizon that their special use permit application claims to address the issue of negative impact on adjoining property values, and I'm calling your attention to the April 10th, 2014 site impact analysis, which was provided by Chase Real Estate Services, who I understand is a real estate company based in Charlotte with no local office. I challenge each of you to review the site impact analysis provided by Verizon in detail and tell me where you find any discussion of impact on property values. I can tell you that you won't, because it simply isn't in there. You've got a lot of paper there giving you the title history of the property that the cell tower is going to be built on, giving you the lease for that property with the owner of the property who resides in the state of Georgia, and giving you some photos from different angles purporting to show that you won't be able to see the tower, but there is not one single piece of property value analysis contained in that entire study that you've been given. There's a good reason they left that part out. It's because they know that the location of this tower will have a negative impact on the property values for Willow Bend, to say nothing perhaps of the property values along Fort Bragg Road and Bragg Boulevard in a major gateway corridor for the city that the city's been trying to redevelop over the course of time, but it will have a major negative impact on property values for Willow Bend. And Crawford McKeithen, who is a longtime and well-known local appraiser, is here to illustrate that point to you, and we'll ask him to do so in just a moment. Members of the council, this special use permit should be denied, both on aesthetic grounds and because the location of this tower will have a negative impact on the property values of the Willow Bend and Sky Drive neighborhoods, in addition to those in the Fort Bragg Road area. Now, these folks don't know Fayetteville. The very fact, and you'll see this from your package, the very fact that they labeled the project Van Story Hills, when this project is nowhere near Van Story Hills, I think speaks to that point quite eloquently. These folks are deaf to the city of Fayetteville. They're paying lip service to the impact that this tower will have on property values and property taxes in one of Fayetteville's finest residential neighborhoods. They can achieve their goals in some other location. They should be made to do so. And in fact, my understanding from the last zoning commission meeting was that Verizon is currently in negotiations to locate a cell tower alongside another cell tower at the motel at Utah, which is within eyesight of the property upon which this cell tower is proposed. Now, I will cede to my colleagues my remaining time. I will be happy to answer any questions, if I can, that you have before I do so.
Thank you, Mr. Player. We're going to hear from the other speakers before we go through the questions.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, our next speaker is Mr. Jonathan Charleston.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. For probably the last 10 years or so, I've been appearing before this council on behalf of folks that sought to build towers across the city. I've represented some of the largest tower companies in this country. And one of the things we've always tried to do is build these towers in a way that doesn't affect in an adverse way the neighborhoods that they're adjacent to. As I was looking and getting ready this evening, one of the things that came to mind was the City Council's goal of having a desirable place to live, work, and recreate. That's on your strategic plan for 2014 to 2015. That was adopted by this City Council, I believe, in recent months. I will tell you that if this tower is allowed to be constructed in close proximity to this community, it would violate goal number 4. And maybe one of the things that, and I don't know if your staff still does this, but it used to be a time whenever they made a recommendation to City Council, it had to have the support of which part of the strategic plan it related to. I'm not even sure if that's the case now, but at some point in the future, staff had to indicate, Mr. Art, and you and I have talked about this before, what part of the strategic plan supports the action that staff is requesting council to take. I will submit to you again that goal number 4 is violated if, in fact, City Council were to adopt the recommendation of staff, because this does not promote the quality of life in one of the most established communities in this city. Now, all of you have heard about the NIMBY concept, not in my backyard. Normally it applies to affordable housing coming to town. I'm going to apply it to this situation. How many of you will want this tower in your backyard as you look out your window with something that looks like it's out of Star Wars attached to the top of it? That's exactly what it is. I was in Charlotte earlier today, passing through neighborhoods much like the one that's being impacted today. You don't see this kind of garbage in Charlotte. You don't see it in Cary. We don't need to have it in Fayetteville. Now, one of the things that we will concede tonight is that property owners are entitled to the highest and best use of their property. You've heard me make this argument before, Mr. Chris, highest and best use of their property. But the provision is that there cannot be an adverse effect, a material adverse effect, on adjoining property owners. Now think about it. If any of you had this in your backyard, how many people would be interested in buying your home when you got ready to sell it? Same thing that these folks are considering in Willow Bend. One, they don't want to look out their window and see this thing. And two, when they get ready to sell their property, they're going to realize the adverse economic impact. Unlike the presentation made by the Verizon folks, I've been to this neighborhood. I know the people that live there. I know where the wood line, the tree line is. I know where the commercial site is. I know what this tower is going to look like. And Mr. Player indicated on some of the images that he put on the screen what it's going to look like. With all due respect to my friend from Verizon, he's going to get in his car, just like I did today, and he's going to go back to Charlotte. And you all are going to be left with this. Now, I'd like to point your attention to the staff recommendations. As Mr. Player indicated, there are several categories that must be considered when granting a special use permit. I would submit to you that some of those categories simply have not been satisfied. One is that the special use has to be compatible with the character of the surrounding land. I will submit to you again, the surrounding land includes Willow Bend. And I would simply say it's not compatible with the homes in Willow Bend. The special use has to be configured to minimize the adverse effects, including visual impacts on the adjacent lands. Again, I don't believe that this has been complied with if, in fact, City Council were to approve this recommendation. As Mr. Player indicated, the special use also allows for provides for the protection of property values, and we've talked about that. That simply is not true. That has not been complied with. And I'm quite frankly, I'm surprised to see that the report that you have in front of you indicates that it's documented in the submitted application package. Folks, I've gone through this package. There is nothing in here that speaks to the impact of the property values, nothing. We can spend all day. In fact, I would ask the guy from Verizon to stand up here and show me where it says it. I bet he can't find it, and it's his package. So, with that in mind, we would respectfully request that the city do a couple of things, City Council do a couple of things tonight. One, adhere to Goal 4, which is the desirable place to live and work, which is a component of your recently adopted strategic plan. And I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's certainly on the board here, and maybe the manager or some staff members might be able to give that to you, but that's your strategic plan. You adopted it. You all to discuss that. And finally, I would indicate that we would request that City Council deny this request. And before it considers any other request like this that impacts neighborhoods in this manner, that maybe you all should take a look at a more comprehensive review of the way the impacts that these sort of towers have on the communities in Fayetteville. Again, I'm available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, our next speaker is Mr. Tommy Bradford.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor, our next speaker is Mr. Crawford McKeithen.
Welcome, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Crawford McKeithen. I live at 2814 Sky Drive, and Lonnie said I was here to offer a lot of technical information. That's not exactly correct. I'm here as a concerned citizen and as a neighbor to one of the finest neighborhoods in Fayetteville. And I would like to just give some comments and then make a statement that as an appraiser, I have been involved in reviewing cell towers and high-tension power lines and looked at the effects on the value, and they do have an effect. But I'll just read this very short statement to you, and it says, as a 30-year resident of Sky Drive and a lifelong citizen of Fayetteville, I can proudly say that I live in one of our city's finest neighborhoods. I've been made aware of another tower. There's another one when I go in my backyard and look out at night to the northwest. It may be the one near the Sycamore Dairy Road that has 3 or 4 sets of strobe lights on it that I can see. So we're asking, I've been made aware of another tower installation to be located less than a quarter of a mile from my home. There's currently a tower with high-intensity strobe lights located 1/2 mile northwest from Sky Drive. the desirability of a neighborhood is created by its residents and its location. I ask this council to consider the quality of life and maintaining a desirable neighborhood when reviewing tower locations. It's not just Sky Drive. The neighborhoods of Sky Drive, Summertime, Howard Acres, Huntington Park, Scotty Hills, and Utah do not need another or any additional towers, which in my opinion have an adverse effect on the desirability of neighborhoods and which further have an adverse effect on property values. As an independent fee appraiser in the Fayetteville area for the past 43 years, I can state that cell towers and other high-tension power lines that I've analyzed located in close proximity to residential housing has an adverse effect on property values. I ask that this council seriously consider all the statements which you have heard and the information you've been presented and make the right decision to maintain the integrity of our neighborhoods. I ask that you deny the proposed location for this tower. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mayor, we have no further speakers for this item.
Mr. McKeithen, we'll close the public hearing. What? I called him back.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
Quick question before we get into the questions from the panel. What are your credentials? You stated some things as fact. You're an appraiser?
Yes, sir. I've been in the real estate appraisal business in the city of Fayetteville for the past 43 years, and I'm a state certified general appraiser, and I'm involved in residential, commercial, industrial, farmland, condemnation. I'm doing work right now for the city of Fayetteville over on Blunt Street, and I've been very fortunate to have a very high degree of clientele.
Okay. And you hold some type of certification of whoever certifies appraisers, I assume?
I'm the 19th licensed appraiser in the state of North Carolina. I'll put it that way.
You've been doing this for a minute. We'll start with Councilmember Hurst.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Player, I believe you had cited the hotel on Sigmund Street, which has, I think, at least 9 antennas on top of it. In this zoning commission meeting, it said those in opposition presented evidence that the property values would be damaged by this tower and that there are more suitable locations available. The commission voted 4-0 for approval, and you had mentioned that they were looking at that hotel as a possible other location. Is that correct?
That was reported to
Another tower or in place of the one that's proposed on Fort Bragg Road?
Councilman Hurst, I was not present at the zoning commission meeting. I was reporting to the council the information that had been provided to me by my client, Mr. Tommy Bradford, who was present at that meeting, I believe.
Okay. They state here, Verizon in their search ring say that no existing structures currently exist within our search area which would allow us to meet the required objectives, and no other structures such as water tanks, high-rise buildings, electric transmission lines, or any other alternative technology could be required for use of the tower structures. So that's kind of important, because I have to admit, if they could be located somewhere in a nearby area that would be suitable to still take care of the lack of coverage in that area, then I'd be supportive of that. But they answered that question in our packet, so I was just curious if they answered you during that zoning commission. Mr. Bradford, did they answer that question? Okay. Oh, okay. It says 4-0 here. Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Thank you, Mr. Player.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst.
Mr. Moan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This might be again for Mr. Player. The photos that you showed of the home, would that be 460 Willow Bend Lane?
Yes, that's
Okay.
Mr. Bradford's address and his home.
Okay, and so we talk about adverse effect on property values.
Correct.
And if that home's currently for sale for X amount of dollars,
Mhm.
what would be the negative? I mean, how do you quantify adverse effect on property values? I mean, translate that to a dollar amount if you can. If it's 1.7, drop it down a little bit, or what?
You couldn't do it without a full-blown appraisal analysis, which is what I think Mr. McKeithen could tell you. He couldn't tell you off the top of his head without performing the analysis and pulling the comps and looking at the various impacts that similarly situated towers might have had on the property. He has indicated to you that those factors are a negative, but without a full-blown appraisal report, which will cost, which can cost hundreds, if not, close to $1,000 in some instances to generate, then it's impossible to say with specificity this evening that it would cause a drop in the property value of $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000. But I would submit this to you, Councilman Moon. If you were if you or any one of us, and I know this is true for me, we're in the market to buy a $1 million home, $1 million+ home, which this home is, then I would be very sensitive to everything that surrounded it. I would be very sensitive to what the square footages were of the houses that were around me, how the yards were kept. I would, of course, be very sensitive to what's happening in the interior. But if I looked out my bedroom window every morning and I saw a 125-foot monopole, which looks, as Mr. Harmon described, like an artificial Christmas tree, if I saw that and I knew I was going to see that every morning of my life until the day I died, because if I bought a $1 million home, that'd probably be the last home I'd have. If I knew I was going to see that, then I would probably go to the next one that was available. So it's very difficult to quantify for you today what the diminution in value would be. But as Mr. McKeithen could tell you, and as I am here to tell you, and as I know Mr. Bradford and his neighbors will tell you, it is definitely there. If this tower were in place when they were about to locate and build, and he's the builder, he built this house for himself. If that tower had been there at that time, maybe he would have found another place to build. And that's very important when you're looking at a home that would be listed in this price range. I hope I've answered your question the best I can.
I just one follow-up. Sure. And we talk about the Willow Bend neighborhood lane area. We talked about Sky Drive. How many homes in those areas will this actually be visible to? Because I'm saying if it's visible to 85%, those homes are still going to sell because those are nice homes. If it's only visible to one, then I might see a problem. But I've heard people come and it's visible from more than one homes, but that area, Fayetteville, those are beautiful homes and they're going to sell. And I have to make a decision tonight because it's quasi-judicial based on facts that I've heard. I'm hearing some good opinions, nothing quantifiable, and that's what I'm wrestling with right now. I see the points, but I haven't heard anything quantifiable yet when it talks about adverse effect on property values for one home, or is it 50 homes, 100 homes?
And
how do we find that out?
I think I can answer. I think I can answer that for you, at least to a certain extent. I grew up on Sky Drive. I grew up at the corner of Sky Drive and Summertime Road. My parents still live there. That neighborhood, if you take it around through Summertime Road and back into Huntington Park, is 70, 80 homes, perhaps. Willow Bend was built in the early 2000s. And as a separate subdivision off of Sky Drive, it consists of, 9 homes, Tommy? 8 homes. It consists of 8 homes. You can see this tower definitely from Mr. Bradford's home. You can see this tower very clearly from the 2 homes that abut it on his side of the street, you can see it from the house that's across the street from him, definitely. So it is visible in that small subdivision to 50% of the neighborhood. But most visible, I would submit, to Mr. Bradford's home, specifically to his backyard.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Crisp.
Counselor, please.
Every time I try to walk away.
Well, maybe you ought to just stand there a while.
Happy to do it.
I'm looking at the superimposition there,
Mm-hmm.
and my question to you is, as the crow flies, what's your estimate of the distance from the proposed tower site to the nearest home?
Well, from the proposed tower site to the nearest home, it's funny, this neighborhood. If you jump the back wall of Mr. Bradford's house, then you are in what was to have been in the early 1940s a neighborhood of small bungalows that was built up around Honeycutt Induction Center. I'm not a crow, but I am a bad golfer. So I can tell you that from the back wall of Mr. Bradford's property, I don't know how many of you are golfers. You could probably hit a 9-iron to it.
Would Mr. Bradford's property be the closest one to the proposed site?
I don't. It would be close. The house you can see to the right would be equally. Would be equidistant as well, I believe, and I think those two houses would be, yes, from this Willow Bend neighborhood. Now, I believe there's some small rental bungalows on the other side of the wall, if they haven't been demolished yet, that might be closer. But these two homes I know from Willow Bend are the closest to the tower site.
And what do you normally get with a 9-iron?
That's a bad question to ask, because I can't hit one very far. But I don't know. I would say, how many yards, Tom? 400 feet, which comes out to about 120 some yards, and I think I could probably hit a 9-iron that far.
I don't think you can. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr.
It's all in how you twist your shoulders.
Thank you, Mr. Player. Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
For Mr. Harmon.
Ah.
As Mr. Harmon walks up, I could definitely, empathize on what's going on right now, but can you give me an approximate number of cell towers that we have placed in residence homes already? In residential neighborhoods?
Well, first remember that this is actually in a commercial area where the cell tower itself would be located, and it's actually 500 feet from Mr. Bradford's back door, from the mailing circle that we did in doing the mail out, which is 170 yards or so. So it's not that far. I don't have an estimate right offhand as to how many are in or right on the verge of residential areas. We've got quite a few around town that are.
I asked you that question because this is not the first time a cell tower has come to us, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we've had cell towers that's been in commercials. We have one over at one of Dr. Teal's schools. We have them all over. So I guess I'm just trying to, back to what Councilmember Moan says, is we're looking at the finding of facts. What makes this different than the other locations that we have placed? I live at 208 Fountainhead Lane, which Tommy Bradford and some other builders built, and there's a cell tower right by my house. So I guess my question is, I'm trying to figure out what makes this different than the other locations that we've placed.
I'm not sure that it's a lot of times when we place them in commercial areas. I'll put it to you this way: ones that we've typically put in commercial areas have been strictly in commercial areas. They really haven't been on the border of a residential neighborhood. And then secondly, typically those that, because like I mentioned a while ago, there's that difference in the setback of a half of the tower height in commercial as opposed to the full height in residential. So most of the time when they're placed in a residential area, they're on a fairly large lot. So that's typically the differences in where they end up going.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Colvin.
If I could have the gentleman from Verizon. Hi, how you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
Question for you now. I know Mr. Player had made his presentation about the value of the homes, and for me, whether it's $1 million home or $50,000 home, it's a family's investment. So, what I am a little bit troubled about is what is your response to the fact that your site impact analysis didn't have any reference to the valuation of property values, or if they're affected or not affected? What is your expertise, and why was it not listed in your report?
Well, from my understanding, it is mentioned in this report, the report labeled impact statement. I mean, it goes over various things, the research that our expert conducted, and then on the final page, at the very top, it says, quote, "Moreover, this telecommunications facility, built as planned, will have no detrimental or injurious effect on the property values of the surrounding neighborhood or other properties in the general vicinity."
And
he bases that statement on several factors that he addresses. He researched the area, the tax records, consulted with local appraisers, and just did other things to reach that conclusion. And I mean, it's just an expert opinion, so of course opinions can vary among experts, and I guess you just have to weigh each opinion.
The preparer of this was a company out of Monroe, Louisiana?
No, this was prepared by Graham Herring. He's out of Raleigh, North Carolina. He's a North Carolina licensed agent. I think he had North Carolina broker's license, South Carolina broker's license. Lists his qualifications in the packet submitted as well.
So he's not a real estate appraiser?
Yes, I think the final page discusses his qualifications, and it discusses appraisal.
My report may be absent of that. Let's see.
Yep, residential appraising course. I mean, it just lists various courses he took and his qualifications to make this opinion.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up on Mr. Crisp, speaking about crow flies, and to follow up with Mr. Player, my house is a baseball pitch away with my 6-year-old from a water tower. So if I climb up on the PWC water tower that's in my backyard, I could see where Willow Bend is probably. I just need to kind of get some perspective, because I did not, and I should have had a GIS map. Mr. Moan didn't send that to me. I thought Willow Bend abutted near Fun. Does it not? Doesn't it, in that area, the Mount Tasia, isn't that where Willow Bend is? And if it is, wouldn't it be much closer to that 195-foot tower than this proposed 125? I couldn't visualize it.
No, I used to live behind Fun in the Woodlands subdivision.
Woodlands, okay.
Which is the neighborhood built behind Huntington Park.
All right, there it is. Okay, thank you.
The Omni Cinemas. I don't even think you can see it from this aerial map.
Okay.
And the reason we're here is obviously because we received notice, because we're within the geographic proximity required for public hearings, required for notice to adjoining property owners for purposes of public hearings and special use permits. You can see Mr. Bradford's property there in the corner at the outer edge of the circle, but no, you can't even see the Omni Plaza from here.
Okay, I see it. Thank you very much. And Mr. Mayor, Ivan, and I apologize, Ivan, that I didn't spell your last name correctly. It was, what is it?
Musa, Mr. Musa.
Mr. Johnson, if I recall, you're with American Towers, right? And you're the realtor expert. Am I? Yeah. Will they have an opportunity to say anything? I was just curious.
They didn't sign up.
They
Mr.
didn't sign
Hurst,
up. Okay, that's fine, Mr.
But
Yeah, I'm on the next matter, so I wouldn't be part of this. I'll be glad to speak at that time.
If I'm out of order, then that's fine.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Council,
If we could, do we need to swear him in if he's going to speak?
He's already been sworn in.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, he did not sign up to speak at this hearing.
That's fine.
Not for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Player. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Mr. Wright.
Yes, Mr. Harmon. My question is the placement of the tower based upon the geographical mandate of the company that says this is the best place. My question to you is this tower absolutely necessary to operate your systems from this location?
Well, I think that probably would be a better question for the communications expert and
Yes,
not
sir.
myself, because that's, in the first couple of slides of his presentation, he kind of went into, how this will affect the coverage in that area. So it'd probably be better if you had him come up and answer that.
Is it Ivan?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, can you see this map that I have on the computer screen? Okay, this is a representation of the signal strength in the area. This is what it's like today, red being the weakest, yellow being mid, and green being the best signal strength. And then you can see with the tower constructed, the signal strength is greatly enhanced in that area. And I mean, that's the best way to represent visually what the purpose of this tower will be.
So, within that framework, in that radius, you have that pretty much center mass. But do you have that tower equally distanced from each other tower around it?
Correct, yes, because it needs to relieve some of the data volume currently flowing through those existing towers. So that's why the search ring is kind of restricted, much more restricted than it used to be when you were just filling large coverage gaps. It needs to offload those existing towers. That's why it is, yeah.
What I'm looking here, if you look further to your left of the screen, maybe 10 o'clock, there's a tower there. It looks like it's a farther distance from the other towers, and I'm just trying to figure out, did you measure the towers to be able to put it in that particular distance to get the best coverage, or it look like you can place it in another location to get the same type of coverage?
I'm not really sure I follow your question, I'm sorry.
Well,
Can I ask, what's the variance between your tower locations? I mean, it's not an exact science because you're constrained geographically and by zoning. So how far left and right do you have to go to get the best coverage?
Same question I asked.
I don't really have the background to answer that question, actually. I apologize.
Let me ask you this question. Well, I'm next up, right?
Yep, you're next. Go ahead.
Just up on Sycamore Dairy Road, there's an existing tower. Did you guys look at the potential of co-leasing tower space with other existing towers to avoid the requirement to build a new tower?
Well, we always look for co-location opportunities. It's obviously much cheaper for Verizon to go that route, but this search area was restricted to this geographic area that was depicted on that map, and within that search ring, there were no existing towers, there were no alternative structures such as
So the
water
existing
towers.
tower that's less than 1 mile up the road wouldn't meet your service needs?
It was too far for this particular objective, yes, to offload the high volume of data usage that's currently flowing through those existing towers.
Can you go back to your previous slide? When I look, and you said the red indicated the areas with poor or limited service.
Correct.
So, and forgive me, I'm just asking, but when I look at your current cell tower location, if I move back up the road towards the 9:30 position on a clock to the fork of Sycamore Dairy Road, that area there where there's existing towers couldn't satisfy a lot of your red area?
Well, we needed to, a lot of the objective was to service our Bragg Boulevard corridor. So if it was down at the 930 position like you're
Okay,
referencing,
it's adjacent to Bragg Boulevard.
it
so
wouldn't
I don't wanna
serve,
confuse-
yeah, it wouldn't serve that area adequately. And then we could most likely in the future have to construct an additional tower elsewhere.
I just want to ask you, cell tower technology continues to evolve, and other communities are looking at moving away from these large monopole towers to other capabilities where they, instead of a single source for network communications, they have multiple nodes that serve the same purpose. Have you looked at that type of technology and to avoid having to build these large towers in the heart of cities and on major corridors?
I have not looked into it. I know that all the players in the industry are certainly looking into it for various needs and just weighing the costs, benefits, and all that. But I think in this case, they found the best solution just to be an additional monopole in this location.
And my last question for you, you're convinced that this 125-foot monopole, which will be located adjacent to Fort Bragg Road and Fort Bragg Boulevard, you think as you come up, I tell you what's more un-eye appealing to me is when you come up Kane Road and you come to the intersection of Bragg Boulevard where you make the crossover to Fort Bragg Road, this 125-foot tower right there, starkly in the middle above everything, I think would really stand out. I mean, if you go back to the pictures, can we go back to the pictures from Kane Road? Yeah, right there. I mean, those power lines look bad. We're trying to figure out how to get rid of power lines, but look at that big tree. It's not a tree sticking up there. To me, that really, you think that's in keeping with the surrounding
In the best way possible, yes. We want to meet the communications needs and maintain adequate infrastructure in the community, and at the same time, we try to be sensitive to all concerns, including aesthetics. And
you think that's aesthetically pleasing?
Apparently, some people do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chris.
Thank you.
Right there.
Yes, sir.
All right, now you say the red is the weak areas, right?
Weakest.
Now go to the next one. Look how close you are with the weak areas still in comparison to your proposed site.
We
Looks
can
to
only
me like it ain't effective.
We can only fill so much area with each tower, and again, we need to locate these on commercial properties, and to the left and down is residential, so that's about as close to those residential neighborhoods we can get to still serve their communications needs.
It just looks to me like if you went over in that red area somewhere and talked to somebody, you could serve better purpose. The next question I have, though, you read from the report about it will have no appreciable impact on property value. Now, how was that determined? Did your appraiser go and look at the tax records to look at the value of properties in that 750-foot area, or did it just come out of his head?
Well, I'm sure some of it come out of his head because he has a background in the area and extensive experience conducting this type of work. But he also, yes, consulted and reviewed with area local appraisers, developers, tax authorities, reviewed the public records in similar recent zoning cases. And
But you understand my dilemma. I got a man coming from Raleigh or wherever, and he's coming in here on one day or two and says, okay, there will be no appreciable degradation to property value if we put this tower here. And then I got an appraiser with 40-some years' experience who lives here that says to me, there will be. You follow me?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chris. Ms. Jensen?
I don't think I need to speak with the appraiser. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I didn't write it down. Mr. McKeithen. My question is, I understand the residential area, but I'm going to go to the commercial part of it. As we were looking on the map here, I saw where the cell tower is going to go, and they were going to make it look like a tree to look like. My first question is, I guess my first opinion is, if they tear down the trees and we've just got a big pole, is that land around there like, it's a gateway into FTCC?
Correct.
And when you come, and I agree with Council Member Art that when you come off, right up there off Kane Road and you get ready to turn, going into FTCC, that's the first thing that you're going to see. The land, I saw that it was in the back. Can the land up front be developed or no? Is it too small? On the land where the parcel of land, I saw, and maybe I read it wrong,
The parcel where the tower is.
where the tower's going. It looks like it's going in the back.
It looks to be a very small site to me.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So basically, what could be on that piece of land is just the cell tower.
But I also have a problem with the, I saw that picture in one of the documents Lonnie Player gave me, and quite frankly, it looked kind of like a rat tail with a hair on the end, fuzz on the end of it, and as a citizen of this wonderful town for 65 years, which I'm proud of, it's just not the gateway that we want. And Tommy's issue is one issue, but I think Mr. Art hit on it very well, that when we look at this coming down Fort Bragg Road or Bragg Boulevard, we're going to see this odd sculpture of a landscape that will, it would be difficult for me to state, is that going to have a negative effect on commercial values?
That was my question.
That would be, maybe I could be the ice cream parlor next door and say, well, you know where the tree is with the funny top on it? Well, I'm next door to that. Well, but that's not the image that we're trying to create in this city. But when I was sitting here thinking about the ways that these towers affect value, and when Mr. Bradford's and the neighborhood of Mr. Singleton's also here back on Sky Place, what you look at from an appraisal standpoint is that the property itself, the subject property, Mr. Bradford's home place, Rudolph Singleton's home place, there are no inherent problems. The problem is what we call external obsolescence. That is a factor, and this is key in analyzing value. Any factor outside of the subject property that adversely affects its value. That's external obsolescence. It's not inherent to the subject property. And so that's what we look at as appraisers. And I was sitting here and Mr. Player kind of hit it on the head. You've got Mr. Bradford's home, I think is on the market. That if you have 10 buyers that are looking at Mr. Bradford's home or looking at Rudolph Singleton's home, and they all say, this is the most beautiful home I've ever been in, but 7 of them say, I go in the backyard and I see this tower. Well, that's, as an appraiser, there's no formula that I have, but there's a process of elimination that I have. That there is some factor here that is negative, that is adversely affecting the value of an adjoining property. Not adjoining, but a property in close proximity. And so you look at that by saying, okay, maybe then there's an extended marketing time. How does that, if the typical house 2 miles away that's identical to Bradford's house sells in 180 days and Mr. Bradford's house sells in 600 days, you've got a holding period, an extended factor of time, because there's an issue here. And what is the issue? And the issue is something that's negative, that's adversely affecting the subject property. And that's how we quantitatively look at these towers and look at hog farms and anything that's outside the property that negatively affects its value. And
one other point on the valuation end.
Mr. McKeith, and I'm going to need to cut you off. I'm sorry, sir.
I'm sorry.
We got to keep moving on. Mr. McDougal, and then we'll look for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Homes, very high tech today, and I need somebody to answer my question. I don't know. What I'm thinking is the people that are not wanting this are the people that actually need the services that they get from the tower. The community college, we got a letter from them today. And in fact, they're in the business of training young people in this technological age to use wireless. Most of you probably have wireless cameras, wireless connections, cell, especially in homes like this, where your communications is through these wireless pieces. So the same folk that are complaining about it is the people that are using it. To the person from Verizon, is my observation correct or incorrect that these are the users of the services that you are supplying?
Absolutely, sir. Yes, along with serving the Bragg Boulevard corridor, we are serving that residential neighborhood directly to the south and the college area to the southwest, I believe, or just over. And of course, yeah, everybody will complain about bad service and wants good cell coverage and wireless coverage, but nobody wants to see, the pig being slaughtered, so to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mustaf. Council, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And thank you all for the findings of facts that you shared with us tonight. Of course, that's what we have to make this deliberation based off of. I would move that the council, in regard to this special use permit, deny the request as presented based on the findings of facts. Specifically, item number 2, the special use is incompatible with the character of surrounding lands and the uses permitted in the zoning district of surrounding lands. I would submit it's not in character with the surrounding lands. Item number 4, the special use is configured to minimize adverse effects, including visual impacts of the proposed use of adjacent lands. And I would cite the view from Kane Road as being a visual impact. And then item number 7, the special use allows for the protection of property values and the ability of neighboring lands to develop the uses permitted in the zoning district. And I would submit that it would have an impact on those neighboring lands.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Crisp. Council, discussion on the motion, please. Seeing none, I'll ask for your vote. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous. Madam Clerk, we'll go to, Mr. Harmon, I'm sorry, 8.02. Just, Mr. Harmon, allow council to take a 5-minute break, please.
Kangaroo Express.
It's a commercial area, so how is it not?
And then they'll say if we expand the area, it includes
All right, Mr. Harmon, we're going to go to 8.02 and
Mr.
recognize Mr. Arp, please.
Mr. Mayor?
He's getting you right now.
Okay. You got my request. I would ask that the council move to excuse me from voting on this particular item.
So moved second.
Okay.
Chris moved and I second.
Okay, thank you. Discussion. Council, seeing none, I'll ask for your vote, please. Still waiting. Okay, thank you. That's unanimous, Madam Clerk. Mr. Harmon, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Try to make this one a little shorter than the last, hopefully. Although this is another special use permit for a cell tower. This one to be located at 7037 Amarillo Drive. Land use plan calls for this to be a heavy industrial area. Our 2030 growth plan calls for advanced planning for all infrastructure facilities in the city. To give you an idea of where the property is located, we've got South Raleigh Road here. To the north, a mile or so, you've got the intersection of Raleigh and Cliffdale. If you're coming south on Raleigh, you take a left on Amarillo. Then you have to cross the railroad tracks, and then you get back to the property in question. As you can see, it's currently zoned agricultural, along with some of the other properties around it. You'll see in a moment, though, on our land use plan that it does designate those as future industrial areas. Current land use in the area, a lot of single-family, low-density residential. Again, the church that sits back here behind this proposed tower in the blue area there. Most of these areas you can see are fairly large, and even though they're very low-density residential at the moment, they may have one house on 40, 50 to 100 acres there. Again, on the land use plan, all of the areas shown in purple has been designated as future industrial area. And again, this property does border right on the railroad tracks as well. Give you an idea, the proposed site is basically in the middle of the property. Off of Amarillo, and then the church would be on the church does own this property, as mentioned a while ago, and the church and its parking is here just off to the right on this slide. Just to give you an idea of the area we're talking about, this is taken from about the railroad track looking into the property. The tower would be somewhere up in this area, but out in the middle of the property. You'll also notice that there's some high-tension electric lines through that area as well. I'll mention that does or would help to mask the tower a little bit. You've already got those large towers for the electric lines through there anyway. And then here's the site on the church's property where the tower would be going basically right out here in the middle. The church is there in the background. The railroad tracks and Raleigh Road would be behind us to the west on this picture. Conditions of approval, this would be a stealth monopole tower. And the other condition would be the attached site plan with review and approval by the TRC. The Zoning Commission and staff have recommended approval of the special use permit. That's based on the tower be located in a future industrial area. Proposal meets all standards of the city. Proposed tower located in an area on this property that would minimize its effects on nearby residential properties. And those two conditions above of the monopole tower and the attached site plan. Are there any questions of staff before we open your public hearing?
Mr. Chris.
Mr. Norman, I do think we ought to point out that that's not the real Amtrak railroad. That track is not subject to a lot of rail traffic, right? That's Rockfish.
It is Rockfish, Aberdeen, correct. And so I don't believe that it has as much traffic as, say, the ones that come through downtown.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, we have two speakers for this item. The first speaker is Mr. Tom Johnson.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Tom Johnson. I'm attorney with the law firm of Nex and Pruitt at 4141 Wake Forest Road, Suite 200 in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm here on behalf of American Tower and AT&T, who will be the initial tenant on this tower. I do ask that the application and all the associated documentation we've submitted be admitted into evidence in support of this application. And we're in agreement with the conditions that the staff has suggested for the property. We have no problem with that at all. This is a 155-foot unipole tower, meaning it's a slick pole where the antennas are hidden within the pole. We've done several of these in the city of Fayetteville, many of them around some churches here in Fayetteville, with residential areas adjoining, not unlike this one, except there are additional things in this area that make this a better location. But let me go through why is the need for the additional tower at this location. This is a site map. This shows AT&T's, the proposed location, as well as the other surrounding locations. The proposed location is roughly where the orange square is in the middle, just to the left, lower left of the box that says latitude and longitude. The other towers that AT&T has in the area are those that are highlighted in blue that look like basically triangles going out from those towers. This is the before picture. This is, you saw this in connection with the tower in the last application, but this shows the existing signal in this area. Your goal, and mainly because of people dropping their wireless phone landline phone and relying on wireless, and because of the tremendous data demand, we're trying to strengthen the signal to get into the walls of structures. The green would be sufficient signal to get in the walls of a commercial structure. The blue or purplish color is to be able to have strong enough signal to penetrate the walls of a residential structure. The pinkish color is outside coverage. The white is essentially no coverage. That's what this means. This proposed site is in the middle of this area where you can see it's very challenged in terms of no indoor coverage, very little outdoor coverage, and some no coverage at all. This is what happens with this site. Now, it doesn't resolve all the problems, admittedly so, but we have to look at what our tower heights are within the area. Excuse me. On this one, though, you do get some in-building commercial coverage, some in-building residential coverage for the surrounding residential areas, and you eliminate a lot of that white space that is in between. And this shows, obviously, the existing towers as well. This is an aerial. Mr. Harmon showed an aerial of this location. There are a couple of things that he mentioned, the railroad track and the existing infrastructure that's in the area. And we try to locate these towers where there's existing infrastructure that can hide the tower. This being designated for heavy industrial use is one thing, but the other thing is there's a large Duke Energy substation in the area as well as high voltage transmission lines. Again, this is the site plan as you see it. The high voltage transmission lines you can see to the left-hand side of where the tower will be. That's where those existing Duke Energy lines are. They're close enough that when we went through, we're in the midst of the site plan review process here in Fayetteville, and as part of that process, your staff asked that we verify that this won't interfere with Duke Energy and the use of their lines. We've already secured that approval from Duke Energy. It will not impact their lines. But this is not unlike the one we recently had approved that was for a slick pole with a flag on it over at the new 295 and All-American Freeway in that area. Again, that was near Duke Energy power lines. Again, we're putting infrastructure where infrastructure is currently located to serve the community. And this is just an up-close view of the site itself. In the middle is the tower, the unipole. To the bottom left is AT&T's equipment shelter, where their computer equipment that runs the site will be located. And then to the upper right is a generator that will be a standby generator in the event power's lost, so you can continue to use your wireless device, especially in the event of an emergency. This is an elevation by the engineer of what the tower will look like. It will not be lighted because it's low enough that it does not need to be lighted. These are photo simulations that we had completed of the area and of the tower where it will be located. And this, in the middle of this picture, kind of to the left of the existing light pole, you can make out the white unipole. But notice that the light pole appears in this picture to be taller than the unipole. The existing high voltage power lines, you can very clearly see those around the proposed tower. This is another view from the church looking toward the high voltage power lines. Again, you've got the pole, you've got the existing trees, and you have the high voltage power lines. And this is looking from the substation back toward the church with the existing high voltage power lines. And again, it blends in with the infrastructure that's already there in the area. We have submitted the documentation necessary to meet the requirements of the ordinance, including an impact study. It was prepared by Mr. Graham Herring. Mr. Herring's here with me tonight to answer any questions, but he had basically found that it would not have any adverse impact on the adjoining property, specifically because of the existing infrastructure that's in the general area in any event. But he actually did an on-site analysis, and as his report and attached to it says, he's done this for about 1,700 sites in his career. But I will tender him, I can have him come up and talk about it, but I will tender him too to answer any questions that you may have regarding his report and how he prepared it. I ask that you approve it because we've met the requirements. The zoning commission's recommending it, the staff's recommending it. We meet the requirements of your ordinance. It's necessary for the development and for the citizens of Fayetteville. If you think of a large meeting place like the church, it would be important that they have the ability to use data, to use their wireless phones when they're in the building having a meeting. I mean, that's just but an example of in this area. If you want to attract industry to an area that's designated heavy industrial, you need the wireless signal in order to attract development. The folks in my office that work in economic development, and their business is to take folks around looking at industrial sites, they get worried sometimes in North Carolina because they go to sites and they wonder if the folks that are coming over here from Europe that have their phones are going to be able to get a signal when they're looking at the site. But it's a negative factor if they try to use their phone and can't. That could mark a site right off the list, and if this is an area that's designated as heavy industrial, that could be very, very important to the city of Fayetteville. So I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have regarding our application or anything dealing with the application. I think Mr. Herring signed up as the next person. I don't know of anyone else that signed up to speak, but he's available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Herring, did you want to?
May we
call
just
him?
have the one speaker, Mr. Graham Herring?
We don't want to make you speak if you don't want to, but
My name is Graham Herring, 8052 Gray Oak Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina. I did, in fact, personally inspect this site and the surrounding area and looked at the plans, and it was my opinion that this proposed tower, built as proposed in this location, would have no measurable, significant adverse influence or diminution of value on any of the adjoining properties. Our qualifications are submitted for the record. I've testified here in the city of Fayetteville over the last 15 years or more for more than a dozen tower facilities. I have consulted with local developers, realtors, and appraisers, and reviewed some of the appraisals that were submitted outside of any of the efforts that I have made here. I've been in this industry for 22 years. I've been in the residential real estate, leasing, development, commercial, medical, retail development in some 27 states across North America and Canada, and bought and sold property across the United States. and that's my background. And I am not a licensed fee appraiser. I am a licensed broker in the state of North and South Carolina. That's my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron.
No, we have no further speakers.
We'll close the public hearing, go to Councilmember Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. If you'll come before the podium, please, sir, and turn to the screen that shows the before and after.
The propagation maps, this one?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You know, Mr. Chalmers brought up an excellent point in the previous tower public hearing about the amount of data that was not only needed for that area, but with the commercial and a lot of the dense population in that area for the need of the tower, yet here it's pretty much all wooded. I don't see residents. I think you pretty much answered. I want to follow up with this question anyway, but you did answer it at the end after I pressed my button about even because of the fact that it's pretty much all wooded, it is zone industrial, which with more tower coverage would likely be an attribute to locate in that because it's important. So you answered my question, but I just, you're out in the boondocks out there off of South Riley.
Well, and there are a couple of other reasons. When you get into an urban area, it's not only coverage, which this area suffers from lack of coverage, because the way the industry developed is it went along the major arteries, major corridors, and developed those first. And now we're coming to infill the areas where there's not coverage. But the other part is they over time become capacity issues. The existing towers just can't handle the amount of traffic that they have, and so you have to offload it onto an adjoining site. So in anticipation of the demand, part of the reason for this tower is to offload demand from existing sites. So it's a combination of factors, but there's still a large number of residential areas there, and there is future industrial development planned for this area, which then becomes important.
And the unipole, is that completely covered with that white all the way up to the top?
Yes, sir.
You said it completely covered the antennas?
The antennas are in a fiberglass sleeve that goes over top of them, so it's just a single pole. A regular monopole has arms and the antennas outside from the monopole.
So the one that's over off Sycamore Dairy Road where the top part of it's exposed. The antennas are exposed.
Right. That was in a commercial area, and the reason we did it there is it was a commercial area on Bargain Street. I was involved with that one. I think the tower's approximately 150 feet. Mm-hmm. And unipoles have restrictions. When you're putting equipment so close together in a tower and you're having to put cable up the middle of it, it limits the number of antennas and the amount of space you can do. AT&T's engineers will tell you that it takes 2 vertical spaces on a unipole, like the one we're proposing here, to get the same coverage you can get on 1 vertical space on a traditional monopole. So there are limitations, but we're willing to make those sacrifices when we're getting close to a residential area because we feel like that's important aesthetically, and your ordinance encourages aesthetically for us to make some sacrifices to make it fit into the community.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
So that's why that's done that way.
Mr. Moan.
A question for Mr. Harmon, and it goes back to your first map, your zoning map, which was the aerial photograph, the church, and then it had the green outline hashed area. And I just want to make sure, just south of that large parcel, which goes all the way to south, Old Rayford Road, I want to say that's where Fayetteville Tech Community College had bought that land.
To the south.
And they're going to expand. And then just on the other side of Old Rayford Road is right where the new VA Medical Center expansion is going. So would it be fair to say that with the expansion of Fayetteville Tech and a VA Medical Center, this pole, we're talking a quarter mile, it should provide excellent service into those buildings.
Help with that service and help to be able to, bring, as Mr. Johnson said, that it gives the capability of all the stuff that's kind of already going in that area to draw more possibly industrial development up Raleigh Road there as well.
Right. Okay, and I believe that was all green, so it'd go into those two or more facilities. Okay.
Mr. Wright.
I make a recommendation that the city council approve the special use permit as present. I make a motion.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Continue.
Permit as presented by staff with the conditions as noted above and based on the following findings and the facts that's stated by staff.
Second by Mr. Crisp.
Second.
Thank you. Those findings and facts are part of the record on this case. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, council, I'll ask for your vote, please. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous from those eligible to vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Item 8.03, Madam Clerk. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, sir. We just have one speaking in favor.
Okay. Mr. Nash, go ahead, sir.
Sorry about that. I had to take away the other programs that have been used. Tonight, this is the first of two public hearings regarding annexation. This is for the estates at Sykes Pond, the Cumberland County part. The request is to annex one parcel as a contiguous area. It's located north of Stony Point Road, west of Sykes Pond Road. This is a new residential subdivision being proposed out along the edge of the city, right at the county line. It'll be in two parts. This part here is the part that is going to be built in Cumberland County. The remainder will be built over in Hoke County. We're only talking about annexation of what's in Cumberland County here. This map will show you the location of it. The area that's shaded lightly in red is in Cumberland County. The orange line is the county line, which is also the city limit line in this area. The area being requested for annexation is outlined with a blue-green dashed line. I hope you can see that. And the labels are pointing to it. There's also a label pointing to that part that will be developed over in Hoke County. All of the parcel lines in yellow are in Hoke County, just for information. This is just a couple pictures of the site. This is at the corner of Sykes Pond Road and Stony Point Road as you leave the city of Fayetteville. It'll be built there in the wooded area right behind the street signs. Looking up Sykes Pond Road, it'll be the property on the left. It's all wooded now. And one more shot looking east on Stony Point Road. This is at the city limit line, the county line. The property to be annexed is on the left side in this particular photo. This is a site plan that the developer has submitted. The part in Cumberland is shown there in the darker lines. You can barely see the lines that will be developed as lots in Hoke County. The staff does recommend that you annex this area. That's spelled out as option 1 in your agenda packet. There's much more information, of course, in your packet. Effective tonight, and that it be consistent with your earlier initial zoning action. A couple of reasons. The petition has been found to be sufficient. Our departments and divisions of PWC can absorb the area and serve it, and the budgetary impact should be positive. Before opening the hearing, do you have any questions of staff?
Any questions of Mr. Nash?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Art.
Hey, Mr. Nash, just a quick question. Who provides the utility services for the areas adjacent to that property currently?
In Cumberland County?
Yeah, in the Cumberland County.
Right. Well, I think PWC has, is serving neighborhoods to the north with water and sewer. Electrical, though, in this area is provided by Lumbee River EMC.
Okay, thank you.
We'll open the public hearing, and Madam Clerk.
May we have one speaker for this item, Mr. Larry King? No.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I'm sorry. Larry had to be somewhere else later on, and I had to be at Spring Lake first thing tonight, so I relieved him so he could go take his next one. Can I still speak? I'm Lori Epler with Larry King and Associates, or a land surveying and...
Just a minute, Miss Epler. Is she allowed to speak, Madam Attorney? Thank you, Miss Epler. Proceed, please.
We're a land surveying and engineering company here in Fayetteville, and we represent the property owners on this property. I'm strictly here to answer any questions you might have.
And we do have one. Mr. Colvin? No question. Oh, okay. All right, so we'll close the public hearing. Council, any questions? Okay. The public hearing's been closed, so we'll entertain a motion. Mr. Colvin?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to move to approve, approve item 8.03, annexation of estates of Sykes Pond, Cumberland County portion, as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Art. Council discussion on the motion. Madam Attorney?
And to affirm the initial zoning.
Is that part of your motion? That was part of your motion.
Yes, if I can amend it to include, to affirm the initial zoning.
Accepted. Okay, very well. Discussion on the item, council? Seeing none, I'll ask for your vote, please. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous. Eight 8.04 is annexation of southeastern freight line property located on Snow Hill Road. Mr. Nash.
Okay, your second annexation public hearing is on Snow Hill Road. It's referred to as the southeastern freight lines property. This is about 16 acres. Currently, there's a truck terminal on the property, Southeastern Freight Lines. They want to do an expansion. They're interested in adding another PWC water line and possibly a new sewer connection. This map shows you its location. The area outlined in red and shaded in yellow is the airport property just northeast of the site. The subject property is shaded in light blue. There's a label pointing to it. It's north of Snow Hill Road, west of Claude Lee Road. A couple pictures of the site. This is looking west on Snow Hill Road, looking the other direction on Snow Hill Road, looking into the site. You can see some of the trucks there in the rear. Looking from Claude Lee Road into the site, you can barely see the buildings back in the background. And a view from the north looking towards the property, you can see the buildings on the horizon. And there was an airplane coming in right when I took this picture, and you'll see that. It's almost underneath the flight line of the airport. This map shows you more information about this location in relation to the airport. The area is outlined in a black line there. The yellow area is one of the impact zones designated off of the end of the runway, which recommends non-residential development. Site plan map that the developer provided, the same thing basically without the aerial photography. We do recommend option 1 as outlined in your packet, effective tonight, with the provision that it be consistent with your earlier initial zoning action. The same reasons as the other annexation. It is sufficient. Our departments can handle it. So can PWC. The budgetary impact should be positive. And it is in an area regarding electrical service that's served by Duke Progress, not PWC.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. We still have a speaker, Madam Clerk.
Now we have one speaker for this item.
We'll open the public hearing.
Mr. Michael Newman.
Hey, Mr. Newman.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of council. My name is Michael Newman. I live at 5136 Green Meadow Drive, Rock Hill, South Carolina. I'm the civil engineer on the project, just representing the owner, and just signed up in case y'all had any questions. I'd be glad to address them.
Thank you very much for being here. Ms. Davy. We're still in public hearing. Okay. We'll close the public hearing at this point. Mayor Pro Tem Davy.
I move that City Council adopts the proposed ordinance effective August 25th, 2014, and City Council affirms initial zoning action.
Second.
Mr. McDougal, second. Council, discussion on the item? Discussion on the motion, rather. All right. Seeing none, I'll ask for your vote. It is getting late. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous. Thank you. Long drive home tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving to other items of business, item 9.01 is the annexation of U-Haul property on Gillespie Street. Mr. Nash?
This is not a public hearing, but it's a continuation of an item from your last meeting. It was continued to address some technical development standard issues or concerns that the applicant had raised. These concerns have been addressed. The staff recommends approval effective tonight, again, consistent with the zoning action of your last meeting.
Thank you.
I have slides, but in light of the meeting being so long.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. Slides are part of the agenda packet, Council, so I'm sure it's all been reviewed before. Is there any questions, Mr. Nash? Seeing none, Council will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. McDougal.
I move that the city council move to adopt the proposed ordinance annexing the area within effective August 25th, 2014, and establish the initial zoning consistent with the August 11 action on the zoning.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
We have an appropriate first and second. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Council, I'll ask for your vote, please. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous as well.
Red's getting rare.
Item 9.02, we welcome Mr. Scott Shuford to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. We have 7 demolitions on your agenda tonight, but in reality, really only 6, because we have received word this afternoon that one of the sites, the 326 Lincoln Drive item, has been repaired and is no longer considered blighted, and we do not need to move forward with demolishing that one. We have now 3 unoccupied residential dwellings and 3 commercial buildings that are been determined to be blighted and dangerous, and one is located in the historic district. I'll call that one out when we get to it. This was a building that was fire damaged in late 2012. There have been 142 calls for 911 service in the last 24 months, 6 code violations in the last 24 months. In this particular case, there have been a fair amount of council questions on this, and so I'm going to provide some additional details. This case has been around for about 20 months, and in January 2013, at a dangerous building hearing, the owner was given 120 days to repair or demolish this dangerous structure. Nothing happened. Nearly a year ago, in September 2013, City Council approved the demolition ordinance with the stipulation that construction plans be submitted within 30 days. Plans were submitted within 30 days, but they were not compliant with the building code. Despite several different design professionals working with the owner, we have yet to receive compliant plans submitted since council action, and that's despite several submittals. In addition, a fair amount of unpermitted work has been done on the structure by a contractor employed by the owner. In May, we did receive some plans from the owner of the property from a different design professional. We reviewed those plans, and we provided the parties with 25 very specific comments based upon our review. These were conditions that were needed to be met in order to meet the building code. And we waited until August 11th to receive a response to that, and the resubmitted plans met only 12 of the 25 specific comments we provided way back in May. So as a result of this history, staff has lost confidence in the potential for meaningful progress in this case, and our recommendations for council to approve the demo ordinance that's before you tonight, and to rescind the prior demolition ordinance, so that one's off the books, and that will allow us to move forward with a resolution of this issue. Again, this property is located on Eastern Boulevard, shown here in the shaded area. This is another case that has generated some questions, but basically this is a property at 1301 Hillsborough Street. There was a church building on this site that burned in 2010, and we were able to eventually get that building demolished. This is the education building that was associated with this, with the church. And we're still owed roughly $100,000 in assessments for the demolition of the church building. There's about $6,611 in outstanding taxes. I'm not going to provide you with the same level of detail I did with the first case, but this is a situation where this building has been allowed over the past 4 years to deteriorate to the point where it's probably not cost effective to repair it. And as with the Southeastern Boulevard case, we're unconvinced that there's going to be progress likely to be made. And so, again, it's our, based on our experience, we'll be recommending that you approve a demolition ordinance. Here's the location, and you'll note that it's very near the Department of Social Services property, located off Ramsey Street. Here's the 326 Lincoln Drive. The good news is that this one is off your case tonight, and I'll make sure I mention that when I go through the recommendations at the end. 606 Link Street, there's been quite a few calls for 9/11 service over the past 2 years, some non-code violations, and outstanding taxes as well. And there's a location on Link Street. You'll note that a large amount of the property in this area is vacant as buildings have been demolished along Link Street. Here's the one in the historic district. This is 135 Person Street. This building had a 1-year delay placed upon its demolition by the Historic Resources Commission. At that time, the owner was proposing to demolish it. We've seen no indication that we're going to move forward. We've had to put barricades in the street to protect the sidewalk because the facade is in danger of coming off. It's our goal to move forward with an engineering assessment so that the surrounding properties are not going to be adversely affected by the demolition, and we'll move forward with taking this one down. You actually approved a couple of months ago the 133 Person Street associated with this, so this is sort of a cleanup coming back to you because there are literally 2 addresses, so we needed to get your permission on this one as well. And here's this property located primarily on Person Street. 921 Powell Street, here's a blighted building with 5 calls for 911 service and 8 code violations. We've got a fair amount of money in outstanding city assessments for lot cleaning. The location on Powell Street. 423 School Street. This is the last one we have for you tonight. We have been in contact with the owner as of today. There is a desire on her part to tear it down herself, but as we discussed it with her, she felt comfortable allowing it to go forward so that we would, if necessary, be able to tear it down as a city if she is unable to proceed. And so it's our goal to have her do it, but if that doesn't materialize, we will take that action if you approve the demolition ordinance tonight. And again, the location of the property. So our requested action is to have you move to authorize staff to proceed with demolition of blighted and dangerous structures located at 225 Southeastern Boulevard, 1301 Hillsborough Street, 606 Link Street, 135 Person Street, 1921 Powell Street, and 423 School Street.
Thank you, Mr. Shue.
As well as to move to rescind the prior ordinance that dealt with 225 Southeastern Boulevard.
Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Shuford. I move to authorize staff to proceed with demolition of the blighted and dangerous structures located at 225 Southeastern Boulevard, 1301 Hillsborough Street, 606 Link Street, 135 Pershing Street, 1921 Powell Street, 423 School Street, and move to rescind ordinance NS 2013-031.
Seconded by Councilmember Wright. Is there discussion on the motion? Mr. Colvin.
Thank you, Mr. Shuford. You know, I understand the importance of cleaning up some of the blighted areas. We understand about the correlation between uninhabitable properties or unused properties and crime, and so we're definitely conscious of that. You know, just as a small business owner, I have, you know, an issue with sometimes, you know, when business owners tend to make investments into their business, at times things come up, you run out of capital, your plans don't quite work like you anticipated, but, you know, at the same token, you took the risk to put your capital out there with some expectation to see it again. On these two particular business cases, I wanted to know a couple things about the process. Well, we're in a discussion, so I really can't debate it, but what I wanted to know was, is the process the same for residences as it is for commercial or business property as far as the demolition or the compliance?
Yes, sir, it is. And essentially, let's say we have a demolition order that's granted by Mr. Swanson, our housing and code enforcement manager. He holds a hearing before he issues that order, and the property owners are invited to attend that hearing. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. In the case of both the two that you're talking about, the one on Eastern Boulevard and the one on Hillsborough Street, the property owners both attended. Because they showed up and made an argument that they intended to move forward with some action on their property, he gave both of them 120 days. Normally it's a 60 or 90-day allowance. And usually we expect within that time frame that someone can arrange to have a professional look at the property and provide a repair plan, get that in, and we move forward. And if there's good faith shown during that period, then we're happy to extend it, because it's certainly in the city's interest to have the owner manage the property properly, or to take the property down themselves so that we don't have to go to the expense of doing that. So we have a sort of a built-in incentive, if you will, for city staff to try to keep the process in private hands. But when we start to see long periods of time go by, and we haven't had such a long period with the South Hillsborough Street as we did with the prior church that was on that property, but it's associated with that, so roughly 4 years there. We're coming up on 2 years with the Southeastern Boulevard situation. Both of those cases, we're just not seeing the progress we thought we would see, and we certainly have tried to give very clear direction about what we need to receive, especially in the Southeastern Boulevard case. When the last set of plans came in, it's been a series of submittals of information on this. I asked Mr. Maples to be very explicit in his review and to list exactly what needed to be done, and there were 25 issues associated with those plans. And if those issues have been taken care of, or at least the great majority of them have been taken care of in the August submittal, we'd probably be here saying, let's postpone this for a little while. But when less than half of the conditions have been addressed, or issues have been addressed, and this is one of many submittals from this particular property owner, we just have to think that there's a failure to be able to get to a good resolution of this situation, which is why we're asking you to take this action tonight.
Okay, and final question. So if I submitted a plan to you and recommendations were made to make corrections to it, how long am I given to complete those recommendations or those deficiencies? And do you indicate in your response back what my deadline is, or do you make it clear as to what my compliance date is?
Well, what we do have is some boilerplate that's part of our standard letter back to a property owner that says, if we don't hear from you in 90 days, we're going to assume that you're no longer interested in having the plans reviewed. And of course, that's been on the bottom of every one of the submittals we've received from this particular
Is that 90
property.
days from the original contact date, or the date that you told me to recorrect the item?
It is, the way we would interpret it is it's not a running 90 days, that every time you resubmit a set of plans, that you automatically extend the time frame by 90 days, because if we held to that, someone could indefinitely postpone both approval or any action to move the property forward. And I don't know whether there's some misunderstanding about this, but the reality is we've gone to a lot of effort to clearly communicate what's required, and that effort has not been responded back in our direction, at least from our opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Shuford. Mr. Crisp.
Mr. Shuford, pull up the picture of 225 Southeastern Boulevard, please.
Probably be better off just to get out of this and bring it back up again.
Just right
yes,
there.
Sir.
Now, is that plywood I'm looking at?
Yes, sir. The rear of the structure is got some wooden area, and I believe that this has been put up to as an attempt to secure it.
That's just to secure it, to keep people from going in, is that correct?
That's my impression, yes, sir.
Where are the improvements that have been done since January of 2013?
The unpermitted work that has been done was to repair a hole in the roof that was caused by a fire. And there may have been some interior work done. I can't tell you for sure what has been done, other than we do know work has been done on the building, and because there's not a permit associated with it, we're not inspecting it. So we can't tell you exactly what's been done.
Now, looking at that plywood there, was that erected to blockade anyone from going in? Was that erected according to the city code?
It's obviously erected, it's plywood put up to secure the building. There's an effort to paint it the right color. If you recall, we have a boarding provision that says that for a house, for example, you can put plywood over windows and things like this, but this one's sort of unprecedented.
Well, the reason I asked, some of it is white, looks like it was painted, and some of it is in raw form, and I'm just in a quandary as to whether or not the owner considered that a part of the improvement or repairs, as opposed to simply boarding it up?
No, sir, I don't want to speak for anyone, but I'm pretty sure that that was just to secure the structure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and council, respectfully, I call for the question.
Very good. Well, I'm not sure you're going to have to do that. You mind if I, well, procedurally, we can do that. Is there a second for the call for question, Madam Attorney? Or do we have to have a supermajority? I don't think everybody's done asking questions.
Right, so you would need to vote on the call for the question, and if there is two-thirds of council that is interested in ceasing discussion, then you would move to vote on your motion.
Okay. Does the call for question need a second?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Moan.
Thank you, Mr. Mullin.
All right, council, we're voting on the call for question, please. Interesting, unanimous. All right, at this point, I'll take a motion, please, on the item. I'm sorry, there's a motion on the item. In a further discussion on the agenda item, on the motion. All right, seeing none, I'll ask for your vote, council. It's getting late. One more.
Are we asking, where's the motion? The motion was to call for the question.
No, there was a prior motion. Madam Attorney?
Who made the prior motion?
Pro Tem Davey made the motion with.
Mr. Mayor, I pushed the wrong button. Can we?
All right, council, we'll
Now, what
clear
we
this.
vote-
We'll
can we clear the-
everybody vote again. This is on the motion for demolition.
Okay.
All right, that looks like everybody this time. That is 8-2 with Councilmember Colvin, Councilmember McDougal voting against. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schubert. Item 9.03. Did the chief? This is Crime Statistics and Internal Affairs Biannual Report. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. For the next 90 minutes, I want to, it's late, I thought I'd wake you up. I do want to share some information regarding the first 6 months of operation of the police department this year and how we, as a city, have performed in our crime prevention and crime fighting efforts. And I'm going to start with the totals first, and I'll work backwards. And I am going to give you a very quick overview if you'll agree to that. Our total Part 1 crimes for the first 6 months, this is property and violent crimes together, we're showing an 11.3% decrease in all Part 1 crimes. That includes a 11.9% decrease in property crime, and as importantly, a 4.4% decrease in violent crime. Now, I want to get into some of the details of that, if you'll allow me. Our violent crime includes, of course, homicide. Our most challenging this year to this point crime category has been homicide. We are showing right now a 10% increase, which is an increase of 1 over 2013 for the first 6 months. Now that's as of the first 6 months. I do want to share with you, though, that as of tomorrow night, if we can make it through tomorrow night, we will actually be showing a two bodies fewer homicides as of tomorrow night over 2013. So we are showing some gains as we move forward. Rapes, we are down 10%, over 10%, with a total number of 4 crimes that we're showing fewer this year. Robberies were a real problem for us last year. We've had 29 fewer robberies for the first 6 months for an 11.8% decrease in robberies. And our assaults continue to bother us. great concern again with a lot of our youth resorting to violent means to resolve issues or problems among themselves. We are showing a total of 9 incidents increase for a 4.0% increase. Burglary. Burglary is one of those crimes that actually affects more people in any city than any other serious crime. For the first 6 months of this year, we've had 479 fewer burglaries for a 29.1% decrease over 2013. Larcenies, again, larcenies are felt by most business owners across our city. For the first 6 months, we're showing 235 fewer larcenies for almost a 6% decrease in crime. And then motor vehicle theft, we continue to battle, and I'll tell you where it comes from primarily this year, are thefts of motorcycles. So we're up 0.03% in our motor vehicle thefts. That's an overview of our crime for the first 6 months. I can certainly talk a lot more about it if you'd like, or I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have as it relates to crime in our city.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Hurst.
Thank you, Chief, very much. I appreciate it. The burglary down 29.1%, 479 fewer. And you are correct. That affects people personally. What would you attribute that to, primarily, even with the economic situation we're experiencing, joblessness or unemployment? So what would you attribute this to?
Mr. Hurst, we have a phenomenal partnership with the citizens of Fayetteville. The active community watches that we have across this city, the people that are engaged in working with the officers that are assigned to their neighborhoods, that's a direct result of that. Those relationships of our officers who are now permanently assigned to neighborhoods, permanently assigned to shifts, where we have homeowners who have that relationship, neighborhood watches who have that relationship with our sector commanders, who are actually calling in many cases, instead of calling 911 when they see something suspicious, they're actually calling their neighborhood officer or their sector lieutenant, who are then dispatching officers to that area to deal with folks prior to those folks burglarizing a home. The stories are pretty phenomenal, day after day, week after week, that we hear of prevention efforts between the citizens and our officers. Some great police work by our patrol officers and our detectives as well to deal with the worst of those folks who continue to perpetrate that crime.
Councilmember Wright.
Yes, Chief. How you doing?
I'm fine, sir.
Great. You said there was a decrease, 11.9% in crime overall?
So, you're trying to catch me there, Mr. Wright. It's actually total Part 1 crimes 11.3%.
Okay, thank you. The violent crime or serious crimes, 4%?
4.4, yes, sir. I take every 0.1% on violent crime.
And that's good that, the crime is down. Thank you and your force for the work that you're doing to work on decreasing the violence in our city. What do you think contributes to the image that crime is down, but it seems like crime is not down? What is that contributing to? Is contributing to violent gunfire, death by gun, or what is that, or media making it look that way? Can you explain that to us? Because to me it's very important that the image that we have, even though the crime is down, for our citizens to know that it is down.
Well, Mr. Wright, thank you. And you're right. All of those things drive the perception of crime in our city. I think there are media reports that quite frankly, make this city appear to be much more dangerous than it actually is. I think that folks who live a safe lifestyle, a low-risk lifestyle, are at very low risk of being involved in violent crime. In other words, if you're in your home when you're supposed to be, and you're not engaged in a high-risk lifestyle, chances are you're not going to be the victim of a violent crime. Chances are you're not going to be a victim. But I think that that there are some reporting that does cause that. You know, a few weeks ago in the county, we had two, 1 week after another, two very notorious domestic-driven, multiple death homicides. And one of those came right on the heels of a very successful national night out for our city, where our city was feeling pretty good about itself. And then we have something like that occur right at the end of those events that night. So while it's in the county, folks still feel, and it does belong to us. We are part of Cumberland County, but those kinds of notorious incidents frighten people. The incident where so many gunshots were fired and the young man was killed several months ago, that's a notorious incident. And it makes it sound to the general public that we're in a lawless city. And the fact is, this is a safe city as long as you engage in safe activities, safe practices at a reasonable time of the day or night. So I think we have, to follow up on your question or your comment,
Yes, sir.
we have a responsibility now to start putting the word out that if you're involved in a low-risk lifestyle, if you're a law-abiding citizen, chances that the majority of the chances are that you're not going to be the victim of a crime. You're not even going to be a witness to a violent crime. And we just have to start now with our city portraying that positive image that Fayetteville is one of the safest and becoming one of the safest cities in North Carolina. That's our goal.
Yes, sir. Just a follow-up, Mr. Mayor. On that, what are some of the things, one of the main things you're putting in place with the police department to develop relationships with the community?
Oh, my goodness. There's so many. Now, we'll be here for an hour and a half.
Just the main thing.
You know, the relationships we have with the pastors, as an example, starting to reach out to our youth. We're developing our police activities league, working with the Boys and Girls Clubs. There's so many people that want to be engaged with our youth. And so our job, not only in crime prevention and crime fighting, is to synergize all of those activities, all of those folks that want to help, to work in intervention strategies with our youth and with our folks that are at risk. One of the things that I think is a crime driver in all of these categories in our city is prostitution and human trafficking. And it's not just a Fayetteville, North Carolina problem. It is every major city in our state, because what we're learning is that the victims, the prostitutes, and that's what they really are in this human trafficking thing that we're engaged in, are the pimps, the runners are moving these young people from our city to the other major cities in North and South Carolina to keep them one step ahead of us. But we're developing strategies and an attack to not just deal with it here, because if we just deal with it here, the victimization continues elsewhere. So we're reaching out to these other cities to develop a strong strategy to completely eliminate this from our state.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Art.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I just want to say congratulations to you and your leadership team and all the great men and women who serve our community and protect people and their property every day. These numbers are certainly encouraging, and I think it's a great report for the city of Fayetteville. One thing I would ask is, recently there was a report about the number of traffic stops in Fayetteville, and in the past we kind of had a perception that there were an unfair number of traffic stops being made towards some of our African-American males. In light of the Ferguson situation, we put cameras in our cars, and we accelerated that as a council to make sure that there was an objective means of assessing all these stops. And it's my understanding that now, based on technology and cost, that you're moving forward with a capability where each officer will be mic'd and wired with cameras. So in the instance of Ferguson, when they get out of the car and they're taking care of whatever situation, that there's an audio and video recording. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. The body cameras, and that's the generic term for them. We began testing them almost a year ago. We now have 5 of those systems completely in service. And the way we decided to deploy them was most critical need first. We have 2 bicycle officers that are full-time assigned to our downtown area. Those officers are wearing those body cams all the time when they're on patrol. We have one of our motor officers that is wearing one of those. And then we wanted to test 2 in conjunction with the DMVRs in our cars. So we have 2 of our patrol officers that have been wearing these for several months. We're in the process now of purchasing 6 more. And as we move forward, so this is something that the department has been moving toward for almost a year. We believe that as technology progresses, the body cameras are actually going to be less expensive. They're going to be more accurate, more effective when the officer is wearing them all the time so that we can see everything that is going on from their perspective. And so as we age out the DMVRs and as the car video cameras either break or for whatever reason are not serviceable anymore, we'll replace those with the body cameras. So all of our officers will be assigned that and it will work when they're working. We believe it's a great tool for us. The DMVRs now, when the officers have the microphone turned on, we may not see the action, but you can hear it. It's extremely frustrating to be looking out the front window of a car, but know that the fight is over here, or the interaction is over here, and you just hope that they would come in front of the car. It never works out that way. So we want to have those officers so that we're able to see what they're able to see and really capture the interaction with someone.
So basically, you would see their line of sight with these new cameras and
Yes,
the new
sir.
technology?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Chief, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Coleman.
Chief, thank you for the presentation, and certainly glad to hear the direction that the numbers are going. You know, you said a couple things that jumped out at us. You know, some council members have been very active and with some community leaders about youth violence and gun violence, and I heard you say youth assaults are up. And so, you know, that's a bit troubling, but I just have 2 questions for you. One, have any of your new hires or lateral transfer officers that we funded during the new budget cycle, they haven't hit the streets yet, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And any anticipation on when some of those, or how's that process going? I know you.
We hired 8 in the current recruit class. They started in July. They will be effective police officers the end of next June.
Okay.
We are attempting now to hire lateral officers. We started a pretty heavy campaign back in the spring that we experienced some issues with that. And so when we were able to start that back up, many of the folks that we had in the pipeline have decided that they don't want to come here now. So we're redoubling our efforts for recruiting the lateral officers. But again, we lost a lot of momentum for about 4 months in not being able to hire those folks. Once we hire a class of laterals, we expect to have them on the street. From the day we hire them, we can have them trained and solo patrol officers in about 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you. And the second follow-up question is, you were saying before that we've had a lot of high-profile, high-attention crimes that really made the perception look as if crime rate was going up when in actuality, according to your statistics, it's going down. Have you made any arrests in some of those high-profile cases, like the young man from Southgate or the other investigation from the incidents in the former Cambridge Arms? Any updates on anything with that?
Here's how I have to answer you, Mr. Colvin. You know I'm pretty transparent.
Yes, sir.
The investigation is continuing.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Moan.
Thank you, Chief. I wanted to say a special thanks to Lieutenant Podobinski, who just retired. You know, he had our area out where Cliffdale Road separates Councilmember Wright's and mine. And I would get calls from citizens about things happening, and Lieutenant Poto would let me sit. I would text him, and it could be on a weekend. He could be at home, but he would know who was on duty, and he would send a text or get in contact to the officer on duty and send somebody out there. But, I'd never done that before until he kind of came out and started meeting everybody. So I know Councilmember Wright and I, we've got some people that call quite often when things aren't right. And anytime I texted Lieutenant Poto Binsky, he had an officer do something. So I just appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. And that's indicative of all 9 of those sector lieutenants. They really do work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When a problem pops up, they may be in Bermuda shorts cutting their grass, but they're on the phone and making things happen. So thank you very much for acknowledging that.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember McDougal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, along with everyone else, I want to echo the wonderful job I think that you're doing, or the department is doing, in your offices. I did hear you talking a few weeks ago, maybe just a few days ago, about minority recruitment. As a matter of fact, I've been at your last 2, not graduations, but in fact induction of new officers. And just mere observation, and the low number of minorities, especially African Americans, that have been recruited to the force. I also noted your new class that you got coming on next. And maybe out of 20 or so, you had at least 6 this time, so that's. But I'm concerned that we're not moving with enough minority, especially African American officers. Even though I think you're doing a wonderful job now, but I think it would help. When I was a young man here on the streets of Fayetteville, there were minority officers. They stopped where we were. They talked with us, and even after duty, a lot of times they would come and hang out with us, which kept us a little, halfway straight anyway. And I think it's important. Sometimes culturally we speak a different language. Not that we intend to, it's just the way we grew up. It's the culture we come up in. And I bring this up because there are 2 wonderful schools here in this area that I know that are heavy in the areas of criminal justice. Fayetteville Technical Community College and Fayetteville State University. And I don't know what efforts are being made to work with them to identify potential officers as a part of that recruitment. I mean, you guys are doing a wonderful job right now, but I think we could do a lot better. I would not want what's happening in Ferguson to happen in this city, because this city is about 50-50 when it comes to the racial makeup. And certainly I think all of the city's workforce, not just your department, but all of the city workforce should reflect that same thing. I'm looking at the city manager now too, okay? And, from my perspective, I believe that all departments should be moving in that way. So, and that may mean that you got classes where you actually have more African Americans that were recruited in a class. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. McDougal.
If I could, Mayor,
Yes.
Mr.
Chief.
McDougal, you're right. We're not doing as good a job as we need in recruiting minority candidates. And that is something that's frustrating me. My senior staff and I are developing strategies to do that. I've got to tell you, we do have some good universities here with young people who are coming to get an education, and we're not attracting them to stay in this city. And I think there has to be a lot of things to attract a young person from another city to stay here. And I think we've got to find a way to engage those young people in the business and in the city early on. Fayetteville Tech are local kids, and we do need to attract the best and brightest from our community college into the police department, no doubt. I agree.
Yeah, there's a young man, I think his name is Bill Jordan. I don't know, do you know Bill? Have you had a chance to meet him? He actually, he may be able to help you in that. He used to do the BLET at Sampson Community College. He lives in this city, and he drove for many years, probably 30 or 40 years down to Sampson County, and he was doing a lot of that. I saw him Saturday. In fact, he's had a couple of heart attacks. I'm not sure you can get him back to do a little help in that area, help you with some recruitment. But his name is Bill Jordan. And I don't know his number or anything. I don't know where he lives, but I know what he did. All right.
Thank you, Mr. McDougal. Councilmember Crisp.
Chief, everybody said thank you. I don't need to say that. You know how I feel.
Yes, sir.
Mr. City Manager, this is the first meeting you've had that you haven't had anything to say. But I'm thinking to put you and the chief and Andrew Barksdale on the spot. Hear me now. A great concern in this city is that the citizens don't know all these good things. For example, 8 lateral hires, 20 sworn brand new officers. How many in the class in the academy going through now? And these encouraging crime statistics. Andrew, when you going to put this stuff in the paper for all the citizens of Fayetteville to see and know what's happening? Because every day people are saying, when are we going to get more police officers? When are we going? And we're doing that, but there's a communication breakdown here somewhere, Mr. City Man, and I don't mean an email from corporate communications. We need to highlight this in the newspaper, all these good things happen. 8 lateral hires, 20 brand new sworn officers, okay? Sworn in by Judge Hill, and 20-some in the class in the academy right now, okay? Body cameras. All these things need to be expressed, Andrew, to the public so that the citizens of Fayetteville know the things that we're doing, and especially these statistics that show that crime is down in many of these areas. That's what I'm got to say, Mr. City Manager. That's what I'm got to say. That's sort of vernacular meaning get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
Thank you, Chief. I really do appreciate everything what you and your staff are doing each day. I just had a quick question for you. In regards to us as being policymakers, what things do you think we can do? What can you charge us to do as we go back into our communities to help with the crime rate, reduce it?
Mayor Pro Tem, that's a great question, and here's what I would ask you to do. Let's spread the good news. Let's let folks know exactly what is going on, and let's encourage them to be encouraged. We publish these stats. Now these are preliminary, but we're very open with the statistics every month, good, bad, or indifferent. We want folks to know what's going on. We share the statistics with our community watch groups. But I think what we have to do corporately, and this is not just us, this group, and city staff. This is the entire city. We have to start thinking about our city in a different way. We have to start considering the fact that we are making progress, and the more momentum we get, it's the old flywheel approach, the more momentum that flywheel picks up, the better things are going to go. I believe we have the ability to really impact crime far beyond these numbers. And I'm being constantly threatened daily by my staff that we don't want to do it all in 1 year. But you know what we do? We want to push as hard as we can, as fast as we can, as urgently as we can to make this city known as a very safe city in our state.
Councilmember Jensen.
Chief, you all, I think you know how we all feel, and we appreciate everything you've done for us. But I did want to do make you call out a statistic that I heard at National Night Out that last year, and I can't remember it, but it was pretty impressive. Last year we had, what was it, like 8 National Night Outs, and then this year we had
35.
I want to make sure Andrew heard that when he got all his statistics.
And there was some good food out there too, Andrew.
Mm-hmm. It was a great night.
It was a great night.
Thank you. Chief, did you want to go over your 9.04s, your oh, no, that's something completely different. Okay.
Mayor, could I just hit a couple of highlights on our administrative investigations?
Yes, sir.
I think it's important that you might want to know this. Last year, in the first 6 months of last year, we had 79 uses of force in 6 months. This year we've had 30. We're making great strides in how we treat the public, how we work with our citizenry, and so we're constantly reducing our uses of force. We're doing that in several ways. Communications training. I'll tell you, Mr. Voorhees last fall challenged the senior management team to put all of our departments through customer service training, and sponsored and put on by our HR department. We put over 500 employees through that in 4 months. And it was about a 5 or 6 hour block of training, I believe. But we felt strongly enough that that was the first bit of training we wanted our folks to go through. Since then, we have changed the way we do our training. We have changed our use of force policy. I am very, very pleased to let you know that we have had fewer people hit by our officers. And I don't mean by a stick or a flashlight. I mean by a good old-fashioned Fayetteville, North Carolina fist. We have essentially eliminated that except in extreme circumstances, and that has caused a lot of our uses of force to go down. It's caused a lot of our complaints to go down. It's caused our customer satisfaction or the citizen satisfaction of our performance to go up. So we have made several changes over the last 18 months to really change the way we treat folks as we have changed the way we've done business. Assigning officers to the neighborhoods, I think, has helped because even the bad guys get to know the officers and the officers get to know the bad guys at certain hours of the day and days of the week. So we've made many, many changes to really improve our administrative investigative procedures. If there's one area of concern that I have right now, it's over my officers driving. We've had fewer pursuits this year. We don't pursue anymore for just a traffic violation or a minor offense, only for felonies. So we've cut our numbers in half, but my officers have wrecked a lot of cars. And most of those are not during high-speed pursuits. They're routine things like backing, the typical things that cause those accidents. So we're now embarking on some training for officers to teach them how to drive. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. To help them understand the dynamics of backing a police car sometimes in a serious or an emergency situation. And then finally, I want to tell you that we have, you know, that we're working with the Department of Justice, the COPS office, and the Office of Justice Programs to help us become a better police department. We've embarked on a course for our officers and all of our employees, every one of our 500 plus employees, that's called fair and impartial policing, to eliminate bias in policing, unhidden or unknown biases that we all might carry around. That training is open to you, and it's open to any member of the public that would like to come in and sit through a block of instruction of about 6 hours with us. I've been through the training, my command staff have been through the training, and every one of our employees will go through that training. We're trying to get better at how we interact with the public. And back to Mr. McDougall, I'm not comparing us to anybody else in this country. I'm comparing Fayetteville Police Department with Fayetteville Police Department and how we can improve day by day, month by month, and year by year.
Councilmember Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Wright had talked about the perception of crime. Of course, I think our radio talk shows had talked about that, and even those statistics are down. But what you brought up is really interesting that we don't read about, and the citizens probably aren't watching at this late hour, but drop from 79 to 30 uses of force. Some of these administrative changes that you've made are very interesting, and I think that's something else to share with the citizens. These are internal changes that are making a difference, and so I appreciate you bringing that up. My question is, how did this policy change compare to other municipalities with, law enforcement? And I was just curious what prompted that. I know you and the city manager got together.
I learned a long time ago in this business, Mr. Hurst, that there's not really an original thought in policing. And so what we do is from department to department, we take the very best of what you learn. And actually, we take some of the very worst because you can learn lessons from the worst. but we'll go and ask other departments for their policies, for their training. We have worked pretty closely with DOJ over the last year at our invitation in letting them direct us to those departments that have the best policies, the best training regimen, and then we've simply adopted that. We've just taken the best of the best and then adopted it into our policies and into our training and into our thought process.
Thank you, Chief. You haven't done it, but I'd like to remind everybody of the human trafficking press conference we're going to do tomorrow afternoon, 4 p.m. on the LEC steps. So that's open to the public. Would hope that you guys would join us as well. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Item 9.04 is the loitering ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. What you have before you is an ordinance. The legal advisor for Cumberland County, Sheriff Mr. Ronnie Mitchell, drafted the ordinance. It is an ordinance that has been adopted by the county and one that the superintendent, Dr. Teal, requested that the city council also consider and adopt. What you have before you tonight is a resolution which would make that ordinance enforceable in the city of Fayetteville. Dr. Teal was here, but had to leave, but the chief and I are here if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
To move forward with the ordinance that's presented by staff.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
I have a first and a second. Is there a discussion on the motion? Mr. Crisp?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Madam Attorney, the one question for our audience, briefly, what is the intent of this resolution? The main intent? Safety of the children at the schools?
That is our understanding from speaking with Dr. Teal. It is intended to address some of the issues that they have that are occurring right off school property, on public property, the sidewalks in front of the schools, those type of things.
And this will give the officer at the school the ability and authority, as well as other deputies, to question those people that are loitering, hanging around.
It would give them the
just
authority.
Off school properties, right?
It would give them the authority to enforce the ordinance within the municipal limits of Fayetteville. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion. It's been seconded. We've had discussion. I don't see any further discussion. Council, I'll ask for your vote, please. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Madam Clerk, that is unanimous. And now I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Thank you very much.
Mayor, we did have a closed session on the agenda, but I'm certainly happy to proceed with the motion to adjourn.
Karen, that was unanimous that they passed the ordinance, right?
Yeah.